Hey everybody, welcome back to Sunday Afternoon Smokes, your casual conversation podcast from the upstate of South Carolina. My name is Chris. I'm your host. I'm a realtor. I'm also the owner and operator of The Cigar Box, a mobile cigar bar that serves the upstate and beyond. Most conversations are enjoyed over a cigar while I interview the local entrepreneurs, business professionals, and entertainers that make the greater Greenville area one of the most popular places to live in the country. I hope you get to sit back, light a cigar, and enjoy the show. Today, I am sitting down with Dan Eastland. Dan, I like to let my guests introduce themselves. In that way, I don't say anything that they'd rather say. But so take a minute, say hey, say as much or as little about yourself as you like.
This is always a hard thing for me to do because I want to fall back with, hi, I'm Dan. I'm a guy.
Super informative.
Yeah, but for the purpose of the podcast, I have been a woodworker and furniture maker. I was in the military. I did structural repair and concrete restoration. Currently, I am owner, manager, and floor sweeper for Dogwood Custom Knives that has grown into more than just knives. I'm also dad to two really outstanding boys, husband to a wife that could clearly do better than I could, and my family's been Southern longer than the country's been a country, but we just moved up from Atlanta about 8-9 years ago.
Okay.
So first, let me apologize for being part of the problem. But now that I'm here, if we could just kind of close the gates, because I'm going to leave Greenville feet first. This is it. We could literally have lived anywhere in the world. When my wife took her new job, they're like, do you want to do expat? Where do you want to be? And you can do that. And we looked around, and oddly enough, I had worked at Camp Greenville in the 90s. And the Y Camp up on Cedar Mountain.
Okay.
And when Beth mentioned Greenville, I was like, baby, have you been to a mill town? Do you know what a mill town looks like when the mills are gone? But she's like, hey, let's take a look.
Yeah. And
man, we walked out on the Reedy River, and I looked around. I'm like, where's Greenville? Because I've been there, and this ain't it. That Monday, we got a real estate agent, and we had a house 3 weeks later.
Right.
Like, absolutely fell in love. It's the South that I grew up in.
Uh-huh.
Big enough that there's a good live music scene, there's a strong restaurant scene, but not so big that we got city problems.
Yeah. You've seen a lot of change then since being here in the 90s.
Yeah, and it's overly bold for me to say I was here in the 90s. I was in and out, but I saw it in the 90s, and then I saw it 10 years ago and could not believe the difference.
It's night and day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And now you made a comment that I want to follow up on. You said your family has been Southern longer than this country's been the country that it is.
It is.
So you've got really deep roots here.
Yeah. So until the 20s, our family lived around Dansville, Kentucky. And that land was from a land grant for service during the Revolutionary War.
Wow.
And family stayed there until the 20s when there were hardships. They sold the farm and moved to Atlanta. And that's where my family's been ever since until the black sheep, moved.
Sure.
But Atlanta's just too crowded.
Yeah. No, I left, I moved from Southern California in 2019. I'm native Texan, was in Southern California for almost 20 years, but moved here. I was just sick of, in a 30-minute radius is 500,000 people. And I was just sick of it. That's one of the many reasons I left California.
We got married in the early 2000s, and we initially moved out of Atlanta. We were downtown proper. With 2 kids, we were paying a premium to be near stuff we never did.
Sure.
But even as we started moving out further and further out, it's just so crowded.
Yeah.
That
I mean, and it's headed that way here. It is. And when I first when I first came here, and people would complain about traffic, and I'm coming from Southern California, I'm like, "What, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
there's no traffic here." Yeah, I mean, it was probably not as bad in Atlanta as it was in Southern California, but there's some serious traffic there.
Oh, my brother still lives in Atlanta, and if I'm going to go through or go to visit, I have to get 15-minute updates. Like, I'm tell him, all right, I'm coming in at 10:30. He'll go, okay, go this way. And then I have to call him back. I'm like, no, it's looking like 10:45. He's like, okay, well, you're going to have to go a completely different way.
Yeah.
It's just insane.
Yeah. Well, I hope all of the local cities around here plan well.
Really been impressed. One of the things that impressed me was when it seems that when money was cheap, Greenville invested really heavily on infrastructure.
Yeah.
So that when times got tight, the necessities were there, they were paid for.
Yeah.
And I joke when I meet the Uber driver that's had just come in from Ohio or somewhere, and I'm like, hey, great to have you. You seem like a cool guy, but could you do me a favor? Could you tell all your family and friends that it's just like what they heard? We're a bunch of ignorant, backwards, racist rednecks that you're going to move as soon as you can. Like, just me to you. If
help
you
us
do
out,
that little
man.
favor.
Here's a $10 tip, man. Yeah, there are spots. It's really not bad though. But certain times of day, there are spots on 85 that get kind of but overall, it's still pretty good.
I do,
except for people can't drive and somebody causes a wreck, and then it's a nightmare.
I do the run Pelham to Lawrence twice a day, and if I time it right, it's not bad at all. If I don't time it right, I might as well just stay at the shop for an extra 45 minutes.
Sure.
And the traffic doesn't bother me. Again, I came from Atlanta.
Right. Yeah.
I like the culture, and I hope that Greenville can keep the culture that it's got.
Yeah.
That it's old world, but it's refined old world.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. It's always funny to me, and I appreciate you making the drive from downtown Greenville here to Easley, but I'm always amused by the people in Greenville who think a 15 to 20-minute drive to Easley is too far. I'm like, I don't understand that.
I converted so quickly. When we left the Atlanta area, my wife had gotten a job that we just couldn't refuse in Pennsylvania. And after 2 winters in Pennsylvania, you can refuse anything.
Right.
But we had gone from Atlanta to outside of Philly. So an hour and a half to dinner was like, that's just what you did.
Right.
Man, it took me no time at all to be like, 10 minutes? I don't know if I want to go that far to a restaurant.
That's funny. All right, man. Normally we would be smoking, but the weather is not permitting that today. So we're sitting in my lovely studio, which is the living room of my house.
We're enjoying a virtual cigar.
That's right. That's what we're doing. We had some nice mocha smokes on the docket for today, but I know you said that you just don't handle the heavy stuff like you used to.
I don't, and some combination of I don't smoke as much, and I probably need to upgrade my respirators at work. But,
yeah,
the heavy stuff just it sits in my lungs a lot harder than it used to.
Yeah. Well, do you inhale?
To quote a famous American leader, I do, and I know you're not supposed to, but.
Yeah, I find there's probably I talk to a lot of people who use cigars to transition off of cigarettes, but they never let go of the inhaling part. And I'm like, well,
and that's my issue. And I got started smoking cigarettes for probably not the dumbest reason, but when I was in the Army, if I said, hey, Sergeant, I'm going to go screw off for 5-10 minutes, he'd be like, no, you're not. But if I said, hey, Sarge, can I go grab a smoke? He'd be like, oh, yeah. I'll see you in 10 minutes.
Sure.
So part of it was when we were driving night patrols, cigarette would help me stay awake. It was something to do. But the biggest part of it was I could go goof off with some guys
right
at the smoke pit and learn things that you're not going to learn anywhere else. if I smoked a cigarette.
Yeah. Well, first off, let me say that I appreciate your service to our country, being in the military. And from what you told me beforehand, you joined the Army straight out of high school.
I did.
And I was going to ask you, as if your time in the military, where you were first introduced to cigars, because I know there's a big cigar community in the military, but first introduced to cigarettes.
It was, although I was introduced to cigars in the military as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it ruined me. It absolutely ruined me.
How so?
So I was stationed in Haiti for about 6 months, and I had made a connection with this civilian. And the version was he had an uncle or somebody that worked a freighter that did Haiti, Cuba, I think the Dominican, and then back.
Oh, he's bringing some legit stuff, man.
And I am 20, 21 years old, completely uneducated. I don't know anything. And I was getting Troyas and Monte Cristo number 2s for $20, $25 a box. To the point where I'd be on patrol, I'd smoke half of one, and rather than going through the hassle of ashing it and storing it, I just throw it out the window. Like it was a $1 cigar as far as I was concerned.
Dude, that's like I don't know, that's like a $70 cigar today.
And so I got back from the States, and fortunately I brought one box back with me, but I had no idea the opportunity I completely blew. And I walk into, at the time they had these places called tinder boxes. It was kind of a chain tobacconist. And I walk in, I'm like, hey, can I get a couple of Monte Cristo number 2s? And the guy dead just looked at me and said, kid, if I could get them, you couldn't afford them.
Right.
And that's when I found out that
what you'd been smoking.
Yeah, I had started up here.
Right.
So trying to come back down to cigars I could actually afford was a little bit of a struggle.
Yeah. That's now you said that you spent time in Haiti. Dude, that's a rough place, man.
It is.
And now it's rough today. And if it's rough today, I can't even imagine.
Yeah. So we went in, I guess it was 95, 96. I don't know all the politics behind the decision, but it was decided that there had been a coup. Aristide, who had been the leader at the time, had been ousted. And the Clinton State Department decided after 10 years it was time to put him back in power. So we went in, and there was a combat phase and a peacekeeping phase, and I was there for the peacekeeping phase. And again, being 20, 21 years old, when I say I was a naive young man, think of Gomer Pyle, except where his God-given talent was music, mine was warcraft and violence.
Sure.
Like I was this completely naive, why would anybody lie, golly gee kid that just happened to be really comfortable with violence. But that whole experience shifted. There are people there that they're just screwed. That's
the cards they've been dealt.
And it does not matter how they shuffle, stack, work, play. And it really helped me appreciate that for all the flaws people may see in this country, how truly blessed and what an amazing country we have.
Well, I'd be curious to know that a lot of people in our country who are American born, who crap all over our country, have ever traveled outside of the U.S.
What struck me was in the U.S., you have a chance. It may not be a good chance. It may not be a fair chance. It may not be the same chance other people have, but you have a chance.
Right.
Places like Haiti, there's very few people that have a chance.
Sure.
And that difference, I don't think a lot of people appreciate what that difference means.
Mm-hmm.
That you may not be a single generation vaulting into where you want to be, but you have a chance. And what's even more important is your kids have a chance.
Right.
You know, it is possible that even if it's a small step, you can step up and you can position your kids to step up and their kids to step up. and that there's places in the world where you just
that doesn't exist.
No, you
in Haiti it doesn't exist.
If you're lucky, you make it to 30.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just not pathways up.
Yeah. Well, my very first pastor's father-in-law was a missionary to Haiti. And this was back in the 90s that he was a missionary there. And he said those people, they're into like the dark witchcraft and heavy stuff.
So
I don't know if you ever came across any of that. And
some, we did a moderate amount of street patrols, so we had some interactions.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to choose my words carefully, not to give people the wrong impression. My father had an interest in things that were hard to explain, and that could be everything from the occult to ghosts to. So I had a mindset where I was a little more willing to see, interact. And there's a lot of Santeria, which is Afro-Caribbean voodoo and Catholicism.
Mm-hmm.
There is some other voodoo, and I didn't see the deep stuff, but I met a few people. I learned there's some iconography that was just to let, like, this is a horrible translation, but culturally you'll get it. This is where the witch doctor lives, or this is a sign of blessing, and there is, I think in every belief system, there is very dark, truly evil, and there is white. I love the example of fire. Fire can be hugely destructive, or it can be hugely helpful and beneficial.
Right.
It's how it's used.
Right.
And there's a lot of that concept in that culture of there is some weird stuff and there's some religious stuff, but they see it very much like a tool.
Mm.
And it can twist you. If you do dark things, you tend to become dark.
Sure. Yeah.
But like I said, they, at least the people I had an interaction with, to them, that, for lack of a more accurate term, power was like fire. Yeah, it can burn you, but it also can harden bricks and warm your house and
cook your food and all that stuff. So, as you already said, just, a young kid stationed in Haiti, very naive, very ignorant. And I always like to just make the comment when I use the word ignorance. It's often thrown around as a derogatory, but it's not. I mean, being ignorant just simply means you're just not educated on this subject. It's not a bad or a good, but that time in Haiti did a lot probably just to strip that. I mean, pretty steep learning curve there.
And it steep learning curve. It showed me things that I just wasn't aware of, and it showed me how ignorant I was.
Mm-hmm.
And on a side note,
on human nature, or probably on a lot of things
in the world. I mean, we grew up. I had an interesting upbringing. On one side of the family, we were related to the Atlanta Candlers, but we also lived in somewhat rural North Georgia, and I didn't realize how tight we were until I got older, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways I had kind of a broad education, but in a lot, I grew up in a well-educated but extremely rural North Georgia family where a lot of the evil and disparity and that sort of thing, I just never saw it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure we'll get into it later as we talk, but there were compounding issues to why I just never saw it. But yeah, I theoretically knew that there was evil, but I'd never actually seen it.
Well, I feel like that's just one of the big blessings of growing up in this nation, especially with its founding and its strong biblical foundation and the permeation of Christianity here, you just grow up in a relatively safe environment. Like I said, relatively.
Yeah.
And joy and happiness and peace and safety is just par for the course for a lot of kids in the United States.
Yeah.
You don't know wickedness and violence and darkness and
I mean, I thought I knew what poverty was. I had no clue. And like I said, we were tight. We were paycheck to paycheck. I was never hungry, but we didn't have anything left over. And I was so naive. I had no idea that anybody else lived any other way. I didn't realize my parents did a great job of my brother and I not ever knowing that there was any money issues.
Right.
And it just never crossed my mind. I know we'd go visit our cousins in town that had big houses and stuff, but it just never crossed my mind.
You don't know I mean, are there people in this nation that are impoverished? Sure. There are people living in really bad conditions. What's flashing in my mind right now is just the really dilapidated, rundown trailer parks, things like that, But there's a lot of people that we would consider under the poverty line today, but they can go to the store and get food because they have food stamps. They're running around with a cell phone in their hand. They have internet in their house. Go to some hard country, and you'll find out what real poverty is.
It was in Haiti, the upper class had running water. Now, don't get me wrong, there were some very well-educated, well-traveled people in Haiti. It was about 10% of the population. But that being said, to have running water in your domicile was extraordinary wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And when you put things on that sliding scale,
right,
where for us, food insecurity, questionable housing, maybe a small percentage of people living on the streets is the bottom end, and that is really nowhere near.
Yeah. I try and balance that in my head a lot because a person that's really struggling, they may have some of the amenities like that we just talked about. They might have a cell phone. They might be struggling. And I mean, if you live in the kind of situation where you can turn a knob at your sink and get hot water, that's a pretty big deal. But knowing that the people in Haiti or wherever else are really suffering, that doesn't help you pay your next grocery bill.
I wholeheartedly.
So there's a little bit of mental balancing there that.
Well, and it's just because the worst day of your life isn't as bad as the worst day of somebody else's, doesn't mean it's not a terrible day.
Correct.
Or that it wasn't the worst day. And, the kid in deep rural Appalachia or inner city that is on one meal a day, just because somebody's got it worse, I'm not trying to take away that they're hungry.
Right.
Or that it's a legitimate crisis.
Yeah.
I don't want to take that away.
100% agree with that.
My perspective, what was really the shift for me is in the case of the person in America, it might be a brutal struggle. It is going to be a brutal struggle, but there is a path.
You have that chance.
Yeah. And I don't think people appreciate on so many levels of a chance. And somebody being lost at sea, the chance of being rescued is the difference between surviving and not surviving.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of psychological research, but there is a chance is what makes it so some people can wake up and keep going.
It's that glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
That we lock on to.
Yeah.
Keeps you going. Wow.
And before we go too far you made a point on ignorance. There's a great story I love of two Nobel Prize winning scientists in different disciplines. And one had a question, we'll say it was physics and chemistry. And the chemist had a question about physics, and the physicist was trying to figure out where to start. He's like, because he's talking to another PhD, Nobel Prize winning.
Right.
And he's trying to understand, what do you know about the subject? And the chemist said, assume complete ignorance, but infinite intelligence. And I loved that line, because you can be absolutely brilliant and be ignorant on a subject. That's just because you don't know.
Right.
And to your point, people confuse that frequently and are shocked when I'll freely admit that I'm ignorant about something.
Mm-hmm. Well, the fact is that you as a person, you can be an expert in your field or a couple of fields, but 98% of knowledge of everything you're ignorant about. I don't know anything about the overwhelming majority of subjects.
I say that all information is useless until you need it. Knowing how to repair a car isn't valuable information until you need to repair your car.
True.
Being a world-renowned cardiovascular surgeon is not terribly useful if your car's broken down.
Right.
But if you're in the operating room, you don't want a mechanic, you want a
yeah, that makes that's a good perspective. And I want to circle back a little bit, because we said you joined the Army right out of high school, but you told me that school was not your strong suit.
No.
And that's fine. And you developed some anger issues that you said you were able to, some of that came out on the football field and the wrestling mats, and that's a good place to get those out. And if this is too personal of a question, we can totally pass over it. It's fine. But I was just curious, is the source of the anger, is that what made school hard?
No. What made school hard was being brutally dyslexic at a time when it was considered a form of retardation. And this is probably why I'm so comfortable with the concept between intelligence and ignorance. My parents had to spend money they didn't have on lawyers to sue the Cobb County school system so that I could be in quote unquote regular classes half the day. So I spent half my day in special ed, and there were tears to it, but it's exactly what you think it is. And at the time, I was only recently diagnosed on the autism spectrum. So I was brutally dyslexic, and a diagnosis back then wasn't practical because they didn't know what it was. But I had social issues. I didn't get verbal cues. I didn't socialize well. So those two things really combined to make school really hard for me.
Yeah.
I love, there's a comic that somebody did of, it's like an elephant, a giraffe, a monkey, and a goldfish. And they're standing in front of a professor's desk. And the professor says, today we're going to test your intelligence by seeing how well you climb this tree. And it's commentary on standardized testing, but it was, the school system at that time was not conducive to the way I learned. So I did look like an idiot. I did very poorly in class. I had a few teachers lose their temper with me and just tell me I was stupid. I was done a service or a disservice because I was very polite. I was quiet. I didn't make any trouble. So teachers would pass me. And the next thing I knew, I was in 7th grade and I was functionally illiterate.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody thought I loved hamburgers. Hamburger was one of the few words on a menu I could recognize. So I just always ordered a hamburger because I knew what that was.
Gotcha.
Again, my parents spent a lot of money they didn't have on tutors and specialists. Gentleman, Fred Furtall, former Catholic priest, started out as a tutoring service, and then later he built a school specializing in working with dyslexics. And in the greater scheme of things, he might be a small pond, but I would fight the fight and argue that he was the time one of the leaders in not so much identifying what dyslexia is, but how dyslexics learn. So yeah, I knew I wasn't stupid.
Sure.
I was good at things, but I had to work 4 times as hard as everybody else for a quarter of the results in school. And at that part of your life, that is how everybody grades.
Right.
So sports, I had some physical issues. Clearly, at a stunning 5 foot, I think my senior year, I was 5'7" and change, 5'8", 200 pounds on the wrestling on the football field, and 165 in the wrestling room. I wasn't a stunning physical specimen, but it's where the tables were as close to even as they were going to get. I hate to admit that I was this small, but I mean, we've all grown. It was close to even ground, and all the kids that I had taken shit from during the day.
Oh yeah.
That was my time to give some back.
Right.
So I was a very angry young man until much later in life. I didn't realize how angry. And a lot of that came from frustration, not being able to process things well. It was a combination of things. So, I mean, my senior year of high school, I had to eat 16,000 calories a day or 1,600 calories a day to maintain weight. I was at the weight room at 5:30 in the morning. I took a PE class every semester, which was just weight training with the strength and conditioning coach. Most times I'd wolf down my lunch as fast as I could, and then the teachers had just given up on trying to keep me out of the gym, and I'd run laps during lunch. And then after school, 2.5, 3 hours of either football or wrestling practice. In the off season, I competed in judo, and it was good for my sanity. It got the frustration out.
Right.
It was a place I could succeed. And I had intensity that was partially just the way I'm wired. I'm a fairly intense person. And part of it was I had something to prove. In wrestling matches, whistle would blow and guys were there to wrestle a match. I was there to prove something. I went after you like you owed me money. I went after you like you stole money. Because that was the only place I had to succeed.
Right.
And that intensity carried me a lot further than physically I should have been able to.
Uh-huh.
But in football, I was every play of the game. I went after you like it was the final play of the state championships.
Mm-hmm.
That also led to, by the time I graduated high school, I think I'd had 4 knee surgeries, broken a collarbone, torn a couple of ligaments in my shoulder, had scarlet fever.
Just went hard.
And just did not let up.
Yeah.
And if I had learned to just stay down, look, man, we're playing a scrub team on a nothing game. Stay down, rest, relax, and be back up. But for me, every play of the game, every minute of the match was life or death.
Yeah. Well, it was, like you said, it was a place for you to succeed when school was so difficult because of this dyslexia and other things. And, we have come a long way in understanding learning. I don't even know if we would call them disabilities.
Yeah, and that's not an offensive term to me.
Okay. We've come such a long way, and I think there's obviously a lag behind what we learn and then the changes that need to be implemented in the school system for children. And hopefully I think we're maybe starting to wake up to some of that, not we can't put all the kids in the same box because they don't all learn the same. They don't all have the same skill set. Some people, they just don't do well at tests.
There's a podcast. I'll get the name right and let you know to put it in the notes. Anybody who has struggled or is having kids that are struggling, I'm pretty sure it's called A Story to Tell. And it is a investigative journalist that just got turned on to one of the typical "Why Can't Jimmy Read" stories.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned into a series that really dives into how the public school system is structured and why it's structured. I was shocked about how much politics and money is into...
Stinks to high heaven, man.
Well, and how we teach our children and how much stuff that was cutting edge or was fact and science that has now been disproven and people just won't let go of it. Not unlike, Galileo saying, no, here's proof that the sun's the middle of the, and yet for hundreds of years we held on to, no, the earth is.
Right.
Sorry to plug somebody else's podcast.
No, it's fine.
But, I wound up binging it in 3 days, and it is fascinating how much is impeding. You would think educators, and I had some good ones, or I had some terrible ones, and I had some truly phenomenal ones. The woman, Renee Sedlock, changed my life. So I don't want to be disparaging about the public education system.
It's good people, and it's bad.
Let me rephrase that. I don't want to be disparaging about the people in the education system. But the podcast really opened me up to why we're not getting the change that should be so obvious. Why people that are so focused on education and learning are refusing to learn.
That's probably, not probably, that's 100% worth checking out.
And it is everything from the publishing companies that have hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars invested in books and school materials, and they don't want to lose credibility and say they're wrong, and they don't want everybody to throw out all the systems they're using.
Right.
To administrators and teachers, this person that I really respected in college told me this was true, therefore it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Or people that have just gone so far down a path that they're not willing to say, I was wrong.
Yeah.
To political divides. Like there are education systems that people start to apply to political parties and will not look at another system because it's associated with another party.
Right.
Which just blew my mind.
Yeah, well, that just applies to what you said earlier about the science that now has just been disproven, and that goes from everything we hear today, whether it's educational or pedagogy. I don't know if that's the exact right word. I think it's the study of education is pedagogy, but that, or when it comes to modern medicine, or whether it is physics, or like the things that we just are told, this is the science. Well, let's see what it is in 30 years.
In the knife industry, one of the things I used to have to overcome is the statement of either everybody knows or my grandfather told me. And I finally realized the way to handle that was when your grandfather told you that, it was true. Some things have changed between now and then.
Mm-hmm.
There's been some advances in metallurgy since the 1950s. You're right, that was true, but there's now new things, there's new information.
Right.
But to your point, in every industry, in every aspect of life, I know this is a fact. Well, it was a fact because it was based on, but something's changed.
Right. Yeah. So here's something that I'm interested in. You come back from the military. You enroll in Georgia Southern and play rugby.
I do.
I don't know anything about rugby, and I said that I was going to start following it for a new sport this season. Still haven't watched the game yet. I'm not sure I can get any games, actually.
I struggle to find them
without paying for a subscription on something. So the newish Major League Rugby, which founded in 2018, right, recently kicked off its new season, I think about 3 weeks ago. I'm rooting for Carolina Anthem.
As you should.
Based in Charlotte, right. They're brand new, as most brand new teams. They're not very good. I think they're 0-3. They're an expansion team, came out last year. Do you keep up with rugby?
I struggled a little bit. So for a long time, it was international play. It was the American Eagles. Well, let me roll this back a little bit. So I went to Georgia Southern, and truthfully, I chose Georgia Southern because they had a rugby club, and if my check cleared, they'd let me in back then. I think I had a stunning 2.4 GPA. Coming out of the military, forgave a lot of that. My older brother had played a season of rugby, which is how I found out about it.
Okay.
Off the top of the head, football, wrestling, judo.
High contact sports.
Well, I was going to say rugby is the closest camaraderie, connection, team spirit that I have found since the military. The military, it's almost impossible to get that level, but the camaraderie and the need for teamwork in rugby is I have not seen it in any other sport. You can have some all-star players that can make big plays, but you cannot achieve anything in rugby without your teammates helping you. Other than the occasional breakaway, and frequently that breakaway only happens because your teammates made it happen for you. So that sense of working together, camaraderie, like you don't see that anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm willing to make the argument, I may lose the argument, but I'm willing to make the argument that it is the most physically demanding sport.
Oh, it's savage.
And I mean, I roll with BJJ. I'm back in judo. I wrestled. I did endurance running for a while. The equivalent of an offensive lineman in rugby averages running 6 miles a game. 2 40-minute halves, and they only stop play if the ball goes out of bounds or if someone's so bleeding so badly they can't stop the blood. That's the only reasons they stop playing rugby. You go. And to understand the nuances of the game, like anything, it's pretty complicated, but there's a handful of rules.
I was going to ask you to give us the general overview.
So the first and most obvious is you can only pass, technically it is laterally or backwards, but laterally is such a gray zone, you can only pass backwards, which seems like a really odd way to progress the ball forward.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think of it as you have a series of guys in line, staggered back,
mm-hmm.
and everybody is trotting, and then the furthest guy back starts sprinting, and he has passed the ball just before he comes parallel and is at the peak of his sprint, and he runs forward for 10 yards, and he starts to slow down. The next person in line has just hit the peak of their sprint, and he passes the ball to them. So even though you're passing the ball backwards, because it's constant acceleration down the line,
right,
you're actually moving very fast.
Yeah.
So got to pass the ball backwards. You can kick the ball forward. The tricky thing on that is if I kick the ball, anybody in front of me when I kicked the ball is ineligible for play. The person that kicks the ball has to pass you for you to be eligible in play. It's a form of offsides.
I was just going to say.
So there's a little bit of what's going on because somebody will kick the ball and then you might see somebody stand still and hold their hands up. And that is just acknowledging to the other team, hey, look, I know I'm offsides. Don't educate me. Don't correct me. Or they'll slow jog back towards the guys that kicks the ball. And they tend to usually be fast, little sprinty guys because they'll kick a high floating pass and then sprint downfield and get everybody on sides. Or some big lumbering guy will kick the ball and then a bunch of little sprinty guys behind him will sprint forward. And then the tricky part on it is if the ball hits you above the knees and goes forward, that's a penalty against you. So you've either got to catch the ball or it's got to be below your knees and you kick the ball for it to go forward.
Okay.
If the ball goes out of bounds, it's like soccer in that there's a throw in. But rugby, nominally 5 guys will line up across from each other and make a tunnel. When you throw the ball in, it's got to go right down the middle of the tunnel. And those guys jockey to get the ball. One of the things that you might do is you'll throw the ball high and kind of looping, and one guy will grab the waistband of the guy in front of him, and this is a practice time that first guy jumps, and as he does, the second guy basically cling and jerks him, and we'll throw him cheerleader style up in the air. So the ball that's 12 feet in the air is catchable. But so like I said, you got to pass the ball backwards. You can kick the ball forward, but kind of like soccer, anybody in front of you when you kick the ball, you got to put them on sides.
Right.
Ball goes out of bounds. And then there's no substitutions in rugby. If you leave the pitch, you can't come back on.
Oh, wow.
So like when I said with the, if somebody's bleeding and if somebody's actively bleeding, they stop the game. And they will give, depending on league and that sort of thing, anywhere from a couple of minutes to 5 minutes to stop the bleeding. If you can't do it, then that guy leaves and doesn't come back on. But if you leave the field for medical attention, you can't come back on. So like our college team, we had an ER nurse, and scalp wounds, they bleed.
Right.
And in rugby, you don't wear helmets, so that's not uncommon. And this guy would tactically reacquire suture kits from the ER, and guys would kneel down on the edge of the sideline and lean over so that they technically hadn't left the pitch.
Right.
And this guy would suture scalp wounds,
Whew.
rub super glue on it, and put guys back into play.
Dude.
So not only is it physically demanding in that you got 250-pound guys that have to run 6 miles a game. And it's not just jogging, it's sprint, physical contact, push, pull, anaerobic, and then you're back up jogging, and then it's a
meat grinder, man.
Yeah, well, and it's high intensity training combined with both aerobic and anaerobic workouts. I mean, it's 2 40-minute plays. And like I said, if you leave, you can't come back in. So you can't substitute guys when they get winded.
Yeah.
You've either got to be able to suck it up and play, or you got to have enough depth in your chart that you can pull winded guys out. And it's brutal, but there's an elegance to it. Football is a game of inches.
Mm-hmm.
It is imperative that you stop a football player dead in his tracks. Rugby, it's more a game of meters. So when you tackle somebody, technically they have to let go of the ball. And then either side can come pick it up. But as you tackle somebody, if you turn their body, so your body and their body are between their team and the ball, it's easier for your team to get the ball.
Right.
So sometimes in rugby, it is better to take a tackle at an angle and turn the player. And sure, you gave up a yard or two, but the 2 yards you gave up
possession
is much more valuable.
Right.
So it is a brutal game, but it is less of the head-on contact, and it's more angles. And when I played football, my pads were offensive. My helmet meant I could hit you as hard as I wanted to with my plastic encased head, and it didn't do much damage. I mean, I had like 12, 14 concussions, but that's yeah. My knee pads meant I could knee you as hard as I wanted anywhere in your body, and it didn't hurt me. In rugby, when neither of you have pads, you're a little less willing to drop your head and spear somebody,
right,
or throw an elbow, or so the brutality is more measured.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, two guys, there was a tackle. Gal's scalp was just open. They couldn't stop the bleeding. He wound up going to the ER, and the guy that had hit him lost a tooth. And one of the beautiful things about rugby, too, is home team throws a party for visiting team at the end of the game.
Oh, that's cool.
So for 80 minutes, you will do absolutely everything up to the gray zone of legally allowed to destroy somebody. And then right after the match, you buy them a beer, which I love culturally because the play is brutal on the pitch. But afterwards, again, even outside of the team, you've got that camaraderie.
Mm-hmm.
But the guy that went to the ER showed up to the after party and found the guy that had hit him and go, "Hey, are you missing a tooth?" And the guy's like, "Yeah." And he pulls out this little vial. His tooth had embedded in the guy's skull.
Man.
The guy that had his tooth knocked out finished the game. So when I say that it is, it's more surgical brutality, it's still brutal. It's
sure?
just, it's not the head on.
Right. How's the scoring?
Pretty much like football.
Is it the same? But it's not the same points, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, it's what? Football we call it a touchdown. What's the?
In rugby, it's a try, and then
that's worth 6.
That's worth 5.
Okay.
And then you can kick it in for 1 or run it in for 2.
Okay.
And the interesting thing about rugby is the extra point wherever you touch the ball. So getting into the end zone doesn't score. You have to get into the equivalent, the try zone, but the equivalent of the end zone, and have control of the ball and touch it to the ground.
Right. I've seen that they have it's marked in white lines. You got to get in that box and put the ball on the ground.
Yeah. And theoretically, you can be in the try zone and somebody can pick you up and run you out of bounds and you didn't score.
Right.
Because you didn't touch the ball to the ground. Or you can get tackled in the try zone, lose control of the ball, and you didn't score. But wherever you touch the ball in the try zone, they come directly out of there 22 yards, and that's where the extra point is kicked from.
So it's you want to do your best to touch it down dead center.
And even though the person is going to get the try, it is worth leveling them at the edge of the try zone so they have the lowest percentage chance of scoring their extra point.
Mm.
If you're kicking from way out on the sidelines, it's an oblique angle. It's harder to hit the uprights than. So you'll sometimes see somebody who's clearly scored the point, and the opposing team still runs them down and tackles them.
Wow.
And that's positioning.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Now I know a little bit about if I'm going to watch a game, what's going on.
And the other thing that is a little confusing for people is called the scrum.
Right.
And that is, the idea is for different stoppages of plays, the way they'll restart it is your front 3 guys. There's the center man is called the hooker, and the person on either side of them is called the prop. And the hooker will basically hang from the shoulders of the prop. Whoever is putting the ball into play has a slight advantage, but the 2 teams line up and they'll make contact with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ball is rolled in to the middle of that area. And the goal is to drive the other team far enough off the ball that your hooker can hook the ball with his feet and pull it to your side.
Okay.
So
what initiates a scrum?
Keep in mind, I haven't played for 15 years, so I'm trying to remember. The short version is much like in soccer where there's a stoppage of a play or a penalty where they'll place the ball and kick it. Same thing. So, it could be there was an injury, so there was a stoppage of play.
Okay, some kind of penalty.
That
whatever.
was not.
It's kind of like there's a penalty in hockey. Now we got to have a face-off, and
sometimes a penalty is a free kick, so it's not necessarily a penalty. It's a stoppage of play.
Okay,
play was stopped for some reason. Say somebody was injured. Mm-hmm. Now we have to restart play, but the ball didn't go out of bounds, and there wasn't a penalty. So
okay.
Some other issue caused play to stop.
Yeah. Okay.
And hopefully none of the Griffins are going to hear this podcast and correct the several mistakes that I've made. Please understand a combination of haven't played in 15 years, little head trauma, and
I'm going to use that word we talked about earlier. I'm wholly ignorant on this subject.
But the interesting thing is, so at 200-something pounds, playing a club team in college, I was the runt of our pack. That's the front 7-8 guys. And there are videos out there of, big, like the South African or the New Zealand pack. They will bind on together, and that is, there's a way that you interlock arms with each other, so you very much become a single mass. And there's a phenomenal amount of drilling, almost like marching in the army, so that you move as one, you lunge as one. And there is footage of like the New Zealand All Blacks pack pushing a Formula One race car backwards.
Yeah.
Tires spinning, the amount of force that 8 really powerful athletes that have trained thousands of hours to move as one.
Yeah.
It is absolutely amazing the amount of force that those guys generate.
Well, I heard, I don't remember if I read it or if I heard somebody talking about it this last NFL season, that when it came to the the quarterback sneaks and things, that the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line had gotten so good at just as a unit pushing that defensive line forward. Somebody likened it to that rugby line because they were really, really good at it.
And there's nuances in rugby too, where they're called rucks and mauls, where rather than kicking the ball out and getting into what you see as the traditional toss and kick play, you keep the ball in and you bind and you slowly move. And tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of force, just slowly inching that ball.
Man, that's cool. Well, thanks for enlightening me.
I will also give you one more interesting, less so now, but when you get tackled, like I said, you got to let go of the ball. Sometimes you want to try to play it while you're down and make sure your team gets possession, or you're going to hold on to it till one of your guys gets there. And a ruck will form, that push and give, trying to drive the other team off the ball so you can get it. And a ref, at least at the college level when I was playing, and keep in mind, when I was playing, we played with aluminum spikes still.
Oh.
And you'd hear the ref, release the ball. All right, give him the boots. And it wasn't so much as a stomp as it was a strikeout. Well, no, it was a strikeout, so it was down and back.
Yeah.
And guys would take their jerseys off at the end of the game and just have 2 purple lines.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the brutality when you go to the ground. Other fun, interesting fact, and then we'll move on. The most common form of death in rugby is drowning. Less so now that the pitches and the fields are better maintained, but you'd get standing water.
Oh, yeah.
And then guys would pile on and somebody's face would be held down in a mud puddle.
Mm.
And it blew my mind. But it was one of the early lessons that one of our coaches gave the young guys is, when you go down, be aware of how you go down. Because you don't think of being smothered or drowning, but it used to happen.
Yeah. No, that's wild. I never thought of that. That's interesting. Well, that's eye-opening. We'll put it that way. So yeah, since this is our first section usually revolves around cigars, but kind of put that on the back burner a little bit just because we're not smoking today. But you said you got into woodworking in the early 2000s and wound up in the custom humidors and high-end repair, which is a very niche, thing to be in, a section of the market. So how did that happen?
A couple of ways. So I wound up as a stay-at-home dad, and some people tell the story about I had to, and I make the point I got to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could make the argument somebody had to, I was, but I say it was the easiest hard decision I've ever made, and the hard decision was it was such a left turn of what I expected. Not hard as in there's nothing else in the world I would have wanted to do. Like I am truly fortunate that I got to spend that time with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
But being a stay-at-home, my outlets, I'd always been a creative person. So trying to find an outlet. At first it was cooking, and then it was cooking and woodworking. But I had a very small shop, and I had broken amounts of time. So doing some of the big pieces of furniture just weren't practical. And humidors, it was the early 2000s. There was a lot of money out there. Cigars were very popular. I was very fortunate. We were living in North Georgia near a really good high-end, one of the early cigar lounges. And it was the bar and the pool tables and the locker, the giant humidor with the lockers in it. And it was, and it was a fascinating rabbit hole for me. In addition to all my other advantages, I also ADHD, so I was bad about going down rabbit holes. So it was a jewelry box in that it had to be built very tightly, but there was a whole nother level of expertise and technology around what species of cedar to use for the lining, why you line it, how much airflow you needed, how to control the humidity, what you use to control the humidity. Like, I really geeked out in that part. And then partially because of that and partially because of availability, for a little more work and a lot more education, which I enjoyed, the price point on a cigar humidor was way better than a jewelry box. And because they were smaller projects, it was easier for me to do in my shop. My upfront cost was lower. I could do multiple tabletop humidors in the time it would take me to make a table.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I was really fortunate to have a really high-end cigar shop nearby.
Yeah.
And once I learned how to build humidors, by default, I learned how to repair them. And then there were woodworkers that could do jewelry boxes that could do a lot of the repair, but they lacked the technical information of knowing what other effects that repair is going to have to do. Or just knowing, hey, don't let the cedar dry out while you're making the repair. And if you do, here's the proper way to rehydrate it. And here's the proper, use distilled water, different materials. So it was projects I could do, and I enjoyed doing it.
Yeah.
I found some really cool ways to do colored epoxy inlays and that sort of thing.
How is it difficult?
I
mean, it's like you said, there's a lot of technicality to it because we're using a specific kind of wood, cedar.
Yeah.
is ideally what you want on the inside of your humidor. I mean, it holds moisture very well, but the aroma of the cedar plays very nicely with the cigars.
Well, and it depends on the species. Like, you don't want to use Western red cedar.
Correct.
Too much sap, overpowering. So it goes that far.
What everything I've read, and Spanish cedar is ideal.
Yep.
Is what we're after. I know that's not cheap.
Well, and that was the other advantage I had, was there's this place called Peach State Lumber in Kennesaw, Georgia, which was not too far from where I was living. And they brought in exotic lumbers by the Connex, and there were stacks, and you could go through, and it was by the board foot, which basically you bought the board by the square inch, not by the linear foot,
and
you were buying it by the board foot. So you were buying it by the area of the board, not the length of the board. But you could go through and find the one with just the right grain, or the one with knots in just the right places. And if you couldn't find the board you had in that pallet, they'd go pull another pallet for you. So I had a great resource for exotic materials. It was rough hewn, so it was less expensive, but I had the knowledge and the tools at my shop to turn a 2-inch thick piece of cedar into 1/4-inch slabs that I could then. I had one board was a year's worth of liners for me.
Right. So when's the last time you did any humidor related work?
I do some every now and then just to keep my hand into it, just to knock the rust off my woodworking equipment.
Yeah.
I think the last thing I did, I used to do a bunch of them, but I would convert ammo cans into humidors. And I was doing it because young officers on deployment, they have a humidor in their tent. Every senior officer wants to come by and chat. No, is that a cigar? An ammo can sitting in the corner of their tent did not look like a humidor.
Right.
And
they've probably wised up on that now.
Well, and environmentally, a sealed ammo can took a lot more abuse than. So that I used to do a fair amount of those. Oddly enough, I had done a spec humidor out of bloodwood and ebony. Bloodwood, as you'd imagine, is a deep red natural color. And I did it in reverse quarters, so 2 of the corners were ebony and 2 of the corners were bloodwood. And I had a guy do what I had figured out was a local trophy shop could laser cut patterns on my wood, and then I could inlay it with either gold leaf or colored epoxies, and it looked like a master level inlay. It cost me $35.
Right.
So the engraver had messed up and put the arch for the University of Georgia upside down. And it was just towards the end of when I was doing that stuff, and it got set on a shelf and has moved from house to house. Well, my youngest is now at University of Georgia, and while we were moving stuff around, he found it. I was like, this is really cool. But it had been beat up and the hinges had been lost. So actually, technically, I'm currently doing a new humidor.
Oh, nice.
Because I'm rebuilding that one for him.
I used to have one that was like carbon fiber inlay. The whole thing looked really cool, but I sold it, and I just pick whatever I want out of my cigar stock for my business and smoke that. But I've been thinking about getting another humidor and just putting, my allotment in it and having it in the house. So I don't know, maybe we should have a conversation.
I was about to say, if you want to do one, we could work something out. If you want to be involved in the process, we can absolutely work something out. Oh, that would
be awesome.
Because the amount of sanding and pain in the butt stuff that I have to do will directly affect the cost.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, it's a special project, and, you just want things. Aside from the basic function of keeping your cigars, which more or less you can do in a Ziploc bag if you want, a humidor is an art piece.
And that was the majority of my market. Like I said, early 2000s, there was a lot of money and it was everywhere. And there were plenty of guys that were willing to pay a premium for solid 3/4-inch hardwood, no veneer, solid Spanish cedar, initials, inlays, and to be able to set that out. And it was a statement piece as well as a functioning humidor.
Yeah.
And I bristle a little bit about the can-ish, keep them in a Ziploc bag for a while.
Yeah.
A good humidor will keep them fresh for quite an extended period.
Sure. I mean, for my purposes, just because I smoke so regularly, you know, it's fine. Of course, actually, all my stock I keep either in my cigar trailer, which is a functioning humidor, and then the back stock I keep in Tupperware.
Well, and some of these guys were maybe, can't remember when the ban was lifted, but may or may not have been arranged for like shade grown Connecticut leaf to have made it to Cuba, and Cuban grown Connecticut wrapped were coming back.
Right.
So it was important for them for their stuff to keep 6 months.
Correct.
And those were a lot of the people that I was doing business with, where the functionality was important. And once they got that, they didn't care at all about paying a 300% markup to get the really cool, one of a kind. There'll never be one like this. My brother-in-law can suck it because mine is better than him.
Yeah.
Humidor.
I gotcha. Well, let me just stop for a second and say, if you've got an upcoming event of any kind and you want to elevate that special moment with cigars, I want to be the guy to do it for you. And since you're craving those premium cigars for your next function, let me bring the luxurious cigar experience to you. Whether it's celebrating a gathering or a celebratory gathering, a relaxing backyard barbecue with your neighborhood, or a corporate event, the Cigar Box offers a curated selection of the finest cigars brought directly to your location in a custom-built teardrop-style cigar trailer, showcasing 100 individually displayed cigars in a classy cedar-built rolling humidor. Feast your eyes on our curated selection featuring top and boutique brands. Enjoy personalized recommendations and expert advice. You can get me directly at 864-207-2316 or visit mobilecigarbox.com to learn more and fill out the booking inquiry form while you're there. So, Dan, back to the conversation here. You are, you mentioned it earlier, just your knife business, Dogwood Custom Knives. You're the founder / owner. You make knives, mostly high quality kitchen knives, chef knives, steak knives, etc. You also do knife repair?
I do.
Okay. Do you offer sharpening services?
I do sharpening, and I do some limited repair. Some of it really depends on where I am in my work cycle. Sometimes it's, I can repair this for you by Monday. Sometimes it's, if you can leave it with me for 3 months, I can get to it when I can get to it. But but I absolutely do sharpening. I do for a couple of local restaurants. Okay. And then if people want to come to me, we can schedule, and I sometimes can do same day, certainly. Drop it off on a Monday, pick it up on a Wednesday.
Sure. Well, I wanted to establish all that before we dive into the subject. So if people want to utilize any of those services, either sharpening or repair, or they want something made, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
There's a couple of options. If you want a knife, you can go on the website, www.Dogwood Custom Knives. Dogwood Custom Knives for all your culinary needs. And that is, I try to keep some spec and production knives on the website. Keeping stock is a little bit of a struggle. I'm a one-man shop, but you can frequently find something there. I do very little custom work now. I'll do spec knives, but custom, one of the problems with doing custom work is to make it practical. I have to charge for all the design time. I have to charge for all the time that I spent tracking down materials. The difference in buying 6 square feet of a material and buying 6 inches of material can be an issue. So what should be a $200 or $1,000 spec knife winds up being a $3,000 custom knife, because either I'm losing a bunch of money because I'm not charging for the work that I'm doing, or I'm just charging $3,000 and I just have trouble charging somebody $3,000 for a tool.
Yeah.
There's some art pieces out there, and I try to make mine beautiful, but kind of the core of my business is, no matter the inlay, the materials, the artistry, it is first a tool. Every knife I make is intended to be used. And I struggle. And truth be told, at one point I was a year plus back ordered on custom orders, and I never got to make the knives I wanted to make. Every week I was making other people's knives, which was great for money, but my soul was dying a little bit.
Right.
Some stuff I wanted to R&D, I never got to. The really cool idea. So the custom work is pretty limited now. You can get all of my custom quality. There are some ways to get some options, but I do very little of the truly one-off anymore.
Okay. And if people want to follow you on social media, it's at
Instagram is Dogwood Custom Knives, and then Facebook. My Facebook account got hijacked, and Facebook was absolute zero help in recovering my account. So I can't get into my account. What I post on Instagram cross posts onto Facebook, but there is a Dogwood Custom Knives Facebook account.
But it's not you anymore.
Yeah, I have no idea who
stole it.
Yeah, and they don't seem to post anything on it. Apparently there was some nefarious stuff that they could do with the account.
Yeah.
So it's Instagram and then my website, and you can email me through the website or at dan@dogwoodcustomknives.com.
Yeah. Just curious, because I like to ask this. What was the motivation to name it Dogwood?
There is several layers to that. One is there is some cultural significance of the dogwood in the Southeast. There is, I'm not pretty sure. It's an apocryphal tale of, if you look at a dogwood blossom, it's got 4 petals. The tip of each petal has got a reddish brown stain. The center is very spiked. And one of the stories when I was growing up was that the cross for the crucifixion was made from dogwood. And the tree was so ashamed that its wood was used to be the cross of the crucifixion that it stunted itself. And that's why dogwoods are always twisted and short. There's no straight lines on them. And the blossom, the 4 points of blood or the stigmata, the center spiky part represents the crown, the thorned crown.
I didn't know any of that.
And then there's some other cultural significance in the kind of like the magnolia. And part of it was when I was doing woodworking, a dogwood had died in our yard. And I had cut it and laid it up and aged it and had a section of it on my workbench. And at the time, my shop was in the basement. My wife worked from home, and she came down to get me for lunch. And she's like, that piece of tree's been sitting on your workbench forever. What's the story? It's like, well, that's dogwood. It's really dense. It's really strong, but it's knotty and it's really hard to work with. But if you can put your time into it, it finishes out beautifully and is incredibly strong. But it's just such a pain to work with. And my wife, Beth, put her hand on my shoulder and goes, oh, kind of like you. So there's several layers to every house we've ever had a dogwood in it. Some cultural influences, some personal influence, a little comedy.
Nice. I always like to ask people about the origin of their business name because it usually means, it's usually very personal.
And it makes a nice maker's mark too.
Sure. Yeah. So just for clarification, and you said this, but while in the woodworking world, you met a blacksmith that helped you, I guess, make a knife. And it was then that it's just kind of like, this is it.
So there was a blacksmith just down the road from me, and he needed some woodworking done for a project he was working on. Actually, let me roll that back. The truth is, it really did start with citronella torches. Living in Georgia during the summer, if you want to be in the backyard. And I used to get really frustrated that the flambe part of the torch, they'd corrode and look like hell in a year or two, but the stand was fine.
Right.
But you could never find another torch part to fit the stand. And I got very frustrated about the wastage. So I took a low neck beer bottle down to the blacksmith and I set it on his workbench. I said, I want 12 torch stands to fit this beer bottle. Because you can put a plumbing fitting on that bottle and turn it into a torch. So in the process of designing these torch stands, we got to be acquaintances. And then he needed some woodworking done. So I started working with him. And two healthy males, I started to say red-blooded American males, but he's actually a Scotsman. It was no time before we're talking about axes and swords and knives and all things sharp, pointy, and dangerous. And one day he was like, I'm going to be puttering around in the shop on Saturday. And he literally lived a mile, or his shop was a mile from my house. He said, why don't you come down? I'll show you how to make a knife. We can be done with this. And I mean, it was truly, people talk about epiphanies or pivotal moments, but I mean, a ray of sunshine was on the anvil. A choir of angels started singing. James Earl Jones whispered in my ear, "This is why you were made." And part of it was just that moment of passion, of love. Part of it was, I mentioned the ADHD. Some woodworking projects can take 6 months.
Right.
And at the end, when I'm doing a French polish on a cabinet and I have literally spent 6 weeks doing nothing but rub on, sand off, rub on a finish, I hate it. I don't want to go to work. It's miserable. And knives are a fresh set of problems about every 2 weeks. There's a constant turnover. There's just enough variety that it keeps it fresh.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, I don't want to say more variety, but even inside a very specific class of knives, there's a lot of variation. And at the time I was doing humidors and I was doing like period reconstruction furniture, which was fun. It was a rabbit hole I could go down on, but I mean, if you compare how long we've been sitting in wooden chairs to how long since someone took the first flake of sharp stone and cut something with it, like the range of technical information and all the rabbit holes for me to go down on, like I said, there was a moment of passion that combined with the way I'm wired. I had been an engineering student. I'd always approached things with an engineering problem, but I'd always been artistic. And this was a great way for me to blend. It's a tool first. There are certain mechanical principles that are just true.
That's the engineer.
But once you get there, handle materials and colors, and there's room for aesthetic, and there's room for variation inside the mechanically true.
That's the art.
Yeah. And it was a place for me to combine those.
That's awesome.
And Mark Hopper, it was Goat and Hammer, he wasn't just a knife maker. He was a phenomenal smith. There's been some debate on whether or not he is a master smith in 3 separate countries. He argues that he's not really a master, but there's plenty of people that argue he is. To be said, shortly after I got the bug, he moved his shop to downtown Atlanta. And with 2 kids in elementary school, the logistics just didn't work. But in Georgia, there was the Georgia Custom Knife Makers Guild, and I managed to get a hold of the membership list with phone numbers. And I just started working that roster. And now that I've got my own shop and I've been making for a while, I realize how annoying my phone calls were. But I called, I showed up to meetings, and finally, a owner of Fiddleback Forge, kind of did the, fine. Fine. You can come to my shop. You can work. Here's the deal. It's August. There's no air conditioning. You're going to sand handles and I'm not going to pay you. I said, okay. And after about 3 months of cleaning the shop, and some of that handle material is, when it turns to fiber, it is really unpleasant. And it's especially unpleasant when it's 110 degrees in the shop. But after about 3 months, Andy Roy was the guy that owned the shop, sat down with me at lunch. It's like, okay, if you're not going to quit, I guess I need to teach you how to do this. And at the time it was 3 days a week. He's like, I want 5 days a week, no less than 40 hours a week. You have to pay for your consumables and I'm still not going to pay you. And the deal is he taught me techniques and mentored me on the business side as well. And I had a certain amount of work that I had to do for him each week. And once that work was done, I had free reign of the shop. I just had to pay for my consumables, my steel, my belts. And a lot of the belts, he had the pile of free belts where they were worn out enough that it wasn't worth his time. But just starting out, and the belts were $10, $15 a piece. Like, it was worth it to the apprentices.
Right.
And I just built from there. And fortunately, from the woodworking background, I had a solid base of how tools worked, how to be in a shop. And another important part of this story that kind of comes together, it is sometimes interesting how many different threads weave together in my life. But once I had become a stay-at-home dad, Beth and I had gotten used to being able to go out a lot. Some of my friends were up-and-coming chefs, mostly in the Fifth Group and Buckhead Group, or Buckhead Life in Atlanta. We'd gotten used to eating pretty well. And then all of a sudden, I was staying home. I mean, I knew how to do a pretty good steak. I could do a little bit of closer French toast, but that was it. So open up the cabinet in the kitchen, and there was a copy of The Joy of Cooking. So I pulled it down and worked through The Joy of Cooking, and that's how I learned to cook. Occasionally I'd call one of my buddies, especially Todd Mussman at the Unsuke Group in Atlanta, who is a phenomenal human being. I think Local 3 is their big restaurant in Atlanta right now. But occasionally I'd get stuck, and he'd, okay, you cracked your sauce. Here's how to recover it. Yeah, that's a complex flavor profile. Here's something to pair with it. He helped me along, but basically I learned to cook out of The Joy of Cooking.
Sure.
And when I got into knife making, I got very upset that your options in kitchen knives were either overpriced stuff that was 300 years out of date or $1,500 knives. Manufacturing techniques and metallurgy that were in every other industry in the world. In some cases, there were lawnmower blades that had better metallurgy than some of what was being offered in kitchen knives.
For cutting grass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those kitchen knives were still $150. Or in the case of some of the French and German style knives, there was structure to those knives that were necessary 300 years ago because of the metallurgy.
Well, see, I was going to ask you about that whenever you said things are 300 years out of the date. Like, what did you mean? What do you mean by that?
There is, other than because you have a big chopping blade, there is no reason for the spine of a knife to be 1/8 of an inch thick. There was a time when you needed that much mass for strength. Metallurgy has progressed so far that you can get just as much strength. I mean, the frame of an F-150 pickup truck is 3/32 of an inch. If 3/32 of an inch will support an F-150, it is plenty strong enough for a knife.
Gotcha.
So some of these companies are still making these ridiculously heavy, thick knives. And I should segue into, again, I was an engineer before I was a knife guy. A knife blade, with a few exceptions, chisel grinds. For all intents and purposes, though, a knife blade is a double incline plane. And the Greeks taught us everything we need to know about an inclined plane. The lower the angle and the longer it is, the more efficient it is. And the limit to that is the mechanical capabilities of the material. So long as your material stays sturdy, functional, a long, low angle will always perform better than a short, blunt one. So I came to knives and I said, a thin knife at the spine, as long as it is strong enough that the blade and the edge don't deform and stay coherent, is better. And there was this really key moment, and I digress, I'll come back to my point, but at the time, there was this arms race in the knife industry of my knife is bigger and my knife is stronger than your knife. The easiest way to make my knife stronger than your knife is to make it thicker. And as steel got cheaper and cheaper to produce, and more people were trying to market, my knife is stronger than your knife, the easiest thing to do was to make it thicker. And in some of the industries, it had really gotten to the point of sharpened pry bars. Like, people were putting handles on chisels because they could drive it into a tree and stand on it. It was strong, but that didn't make a good knife. So approaching things from an engineering problem, I was doing really thin blades. They were a fraction of the weight. They were easier to carry. They cut better. And I remember being at the grinder and my mentor looking at me and going, "What are you doing? The blade's too thin. You can't grind those." And I pick up the 3 that I had just ground from him. And this was one of those great, if you don't know you can't do it, then you do it.
Right.
Like, if he had told me that I could not do that,
you wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, I wouldn't. And if I had tried, I probably wouldn't have been able to. But since nobody told me you can't do that, I did it. And that significance of that will carry over in a minute. But because I had been cooking and because I saw this huge hole in the market where the culinary industry is completely underserved, I made it kind of my passion project that I am going to make a modern knife with modern materials, modern manufacturing technique, and I want to do it at a price line cooks and home cooks can afford. And part of the way that came about was there was kind of 2 turning points. One was my 2 mentors, Andy and this guy, Dylan Fletcher. I had finished my apprenticeship and they sat down with me and I was doing these thin blades. And at the time I was still learning how to make chef's knives. And I want to touch on that in a minute too, but I was mostly making outdoor knives. And again, it was big, heavy. And they sat me down and they're like, "Look, we're intelligent guys. We understand how this works. I get your math. I understand why these thin blades are better. Nobody's going to buy them. You're going to go out of business making a really good knife that nobody buys." And I went home and I was struggling with it. And my wife Beth's like, "What's your problem? What's going on?" I'm like, "I know this is true. I know this is a better product, but these guys are making a very valid point. Nobody doing what I'm doing is in business. And I'm at this pivotal moment. What direction is my business going to go in?" And Beth said, "Well, up to this point in your life, you haven't compromised. Why are you going to start now? We were okay before you had a business."
I love that, man. I love that. Just a supportive wife.
And
that's awesome.
So I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this. And I was struggling a little bit on how I was going to set up my shop.
Things get emotional around here.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it, man.
This was easier until I found out I had feelings. I used to think I just had the one and my life was way easier. Now that I have to do emotions, it gets a little complicated. But I was struggling with how I was going to set up my shop. And Beth sat me down and she's like, "Look, this is how much full-time childcare for 2 kids are going to cost. As long as you're working on off hours, and when the kids are in school, when the kids are in bed, as long as you spend this or less monthly, we're actually cash positive as a family." And that is how I built my shop. That's how I weathered the really hard times on making my name. I had an uphill battle on the knives are too thin, they'll break. Yeah, I used to have to do some some videos on no, it won't break. Also had to try and do some videos on, okay, yes, if you drive this knife into a rock and stand on it, it will break. But it's a knife. It's not a piton. Why use a piton for that? Use the proper tool, proper job. Fortunately, there's some guys. There's this gentleman, Morris Kachansky. I struggle with the correct pronunciation. He has passed, but he lived up in Canada and was a forerunner in the bushcraft outdoor community. And he preached, carry a thin knife. It cuts better. If it's half the weight, you can carry 2 knives instead of 1. And he taught all these techniques about don't abuse your knife. This is your most important tool. So there were a few people in the industry that were thought leaders that were helping pave the way. But I mean, there were a lot of early years where I didn't make anything. And the only reason I could was Beth had a good corporate job. So she had the health insurance covered. When I left school to take care of Jack, well, to take care of both boys, but it started with our oldest 'cause he came first.
Sure.
She already had a good corporate job. She's years older than I am. So she had a head start. And it worked.
Yeah.
And that's the only way I could not compromise. But, she's like, hey, if you know this is the right thing to do, do it. And if we have, if you go out of business, we're okay. We'll be better if you don't, but we'll be okay.
Yeah, I'm going to stop right there. Your wife sounds awesome. And much like my wife, very successful in her business. And the things that I want to do, like with my cigar business and real estate, which was a necessity at the time, and now this podcast and other things I'm working on. Nothing but support. Nothing but, look, we're good. If you want to do this, then go for it. And I like, fellas, if you have that kind of woman, or if you can find that, she is, there's no words to describe her worth.
Well, and Beth and I worked on paper, nobody, when we met, she was a junior executive at Merck Pharmaceuticals, had graduated from Duke with a chemistry degree, incredibly driven, incredibly intelligent woman, 7 years older than I am, well established in the corporate world. And I was a 23 or 24-year-old college dropout construction worker. And this is technically true. I picked her up at her grandmother's wake. She was living in San Francisco and I was living in Atlanta. There's just no way this works. But while she's climbing the ladder, there were times when she was 50% travel.
Yeah.
And on one hand, she's like, hey, the finances are okay. If we stay in here, go for it. On the other hand, hey, I'm not going to see you for 10 days and we've got 2 toddlers and we're living in rural North Georgia. Go do what you need to do. So we worked. And if you can find a woman that will support you like that, it is an amazing thing. And it's got to be a partnership.
100%.
And there's give and take. And a lot of guys that are in my position don't appreciate what they have to offer. I didn't at the time. Again, I was pretty naive. I had no concept of how rare it would be for somebody to go, yeah, leave me at home alone with 2 toddlers while you're out of town for the next 2 weeks.
But when in a marriage, a marriage is not 50-50, it's 100-100.
Yeah. And as I've tried to explain to my boys, I'm like, you are looking for a relationship that's 50-50, but it's not going to be 50-50 all the time. Sometimes it's going to be 80-20 you.
Right.
Sometimes it's going to be 80-20 her. But in the big picture, it needs to wash out to about 50-50.
You're just all in all the time.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, in my household, this is technically true. I'll use that phrase, but I do all the laundry. I make all the meals. I do pretty much all the housekeeping, you know, and my wife works a lot, and runs a successful midwifery practice, and she allows me to do whatever. And some macho guy might say, man, you're doing all the woman's work. And I'm like, my point of view is I'm doing whatever I need to do to make my wife successful, and allows me to do the things that I'm pursuing.
I was a stay-at-home in the early 2000s, which it was weird. Like, one of the things that I understood but was so annoying, I'd take the boys to the playground at like 10, and it'd be 3, 2, 1. Hello, officer. Yes, you may see my ID. No, I'm not a pedophile. If you go talk to those 2 kids, they will confirm that I am their son,
right,
or their dad. So there was some of that, and there was some, I distinctly remember being out at a sports bar with one of my buddies, and it came out that I was a stay-at-home and I was catching some crap. And finally my buddy's like, hey, when you were a kid, did your mom ever just freaking lose it? Did she just ever just lose her shit? And the dude's like, yeah. He goes, now imagine your mom weighs 210 and boxed in the Army. Is that really somebody you want to mess with? And I had to, early on, it was never a question. A man does what his family needs.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've counseled some other guys that have found themselves, like, if your family needed you to die, would you die? I'm like, yeah.
Done.
If your family needed you to kill, would you kill? Yeah. If your family needed for you to skip meals so they could eat, would you do it? He's like, yeah. So then why are you having a problem with cooking dinner or washing dishes for your family? If that's what they need.
You do what you got to do for your family, man. That's
yeah.
Bottom line.
So it was, yeah, there was some give and take, and there were times that there were some darker times when I remember looking at somebody and they're running their mouth, and I'm like, and like I said, football, wrestling, rugby, judo, the Army. I got so bored in Haiti, I boxed every Friday, and I remember sitting there like, God, I could just punch him right in the throat.
Mm-hmm.
I am choosing not to kill this dude, and there's nothing he could do to stop me.
That is a bigger measure of a man.
And I remember thinking, you couldn't stop me from killing you. And it doesn't say good things about my psychology at the time, but that was like, you think you're giving me crap about being a better man than I am. And truthfully, the fact that I hate fried bologna, watered down Kool-Aid, and want to see my kids is the only thing keeping you alive right now.
If you look at a lot of the ancient architecture, you know, whether it's, I think, Greek or Roman or maybe both, you know, they will have like, what's the mystical Pan who plays the little flute, and all those guys, and they made them
Sator.
but they made them with large penises. But the other statues, like the statue of David or whatever, the guys have really small ones. That was their way of saying that these noble men, they are in control of their passions. And the other ones with the huge members are not. They let their passions control them. Yeah, that is what they're putting into that. And so, like, the measure in my book, the measure of a man, beyond doing the things that he needs to do for his family to succeed, you to control yourself and control your passions is more important than me socking this dude in the face because he's making fun of me because I'm a stay-at-home dad.
And some of this we're
way in the weeds here, but that's cool.
We'll come back around, I promise. And some of it is it's gotten to be a joke. Short version is I'm high functioning, and through luck or God, I figured out the coping mechanisms that somebody else would have taught me. But one of the plus sides of being on the autism scale was it was a logical problem for me. My wife has many times the earning potential than I do. So why am I going to force my family to live at a lower standard?
Right.
So I can prove a point.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that came together. And you're talking about the roles. When COVID hit, my wife's travel completely stopped. She started working from home. And there was a little bit of shift in our dynamic. She's like, I'm home all the time now. I work in a semi-deserted industrial area by myself, so there was no reason for me not to go back and forth to work. And I distinctly remember coming home, and the boys had been at the park or something, and they come in, and they're like, wait, Mom's cooking? I was like, yeah. And I suddenly realized that my 14-year-old did not know that my wife could cook. She's a phenomenal cook. She did, before I got the education, she did all of the cooking, but I realized that was all before his memory.
Right.
My son was now blown away that not only could his mom cook, but she was a good cook.
Uh-huh.
But that was one of those dynamics where it shifted again, that she was able to be home more and took more of the traditional cooking and cleaning task. And I started doing 60 hours at the shop.
Mm-hmm.
And now again, with kids out of the house, her travel schedule, we're realigning. But it's back to that, you got to be flexible and play the hand you're dealt.
Yep.
I got dealt a really driven, educated wife that did well in the corporate world. Why wouldn't I play that card?
Sure.
I also now get some comedy value out of some of the memes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, sure.
What would you do when your wife made six figures and it's the guy picking her up and applying her makeup for her?
Right. Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I don't stay on topic very well.
No, that was partly me just talking about, man, the value of a good wife.
So with the kitchen knives, I got passionate about what I saw as fixing. I got passionate about bringing the knife that the industry deserved. And I was at Blade Show Atlanta, which is the world's largest knife show. And there is a gentleman, Ethan Becker. He owns Becker Knife and Tool. It's a really significant outdoor brand. And we had a mutual friend, and the guy brought Ethan over as, hey, you ought to come check out this kid. He's doing new stuff. It's very new. At the time, I had the only kitchen knives at Blade Show. There may have been like Murray Carter with some $5,000 Japanese knives, but I can make the argument that I was, if not the only, then one of only two or three people out of thousands of vendors that had kitchen knives. So this guy, Ethan, comes by and we talk a little bit, and then I explain some of my theory and my passion, and tell him the story about learning to cook from the joy of cooking. And
that's really where you're getting into cooking in home, and the knives that were available to you. That's what brought you to I'm making kitchen knives, not outdoor knives, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That was, I had almost outrage that that companies could provide a way better product more cost effectively and just weren't. Like that was, it was like every other industry having an F-150 and the kitchen industry had to drive a Model A. Like it just, on so many levels, it outraged me. And that was the hill I was going to die on. That was what I was going to do. That was my passion project. And I wound up meeting that guy, Ethan, at another gathering. We talk and he's like, hey, I have this little get together at my place in Tennessee. Like-minded individuals in the industry, you should come up. And it was called the Becker Heads because his company was Becker Knife and Tool. And I got to know some people. And after about a year in that circle, I find out Ethan Becker is the grandson of Irma Brumbauer, the author of The Joy of Cooking. Turns out Ethan wrote the version of The Joy of Cooking that I learned to cook from.
Wow. Small world.
Yeah, I had no idea who the man was when I told him that his book taught me how to cook. He never said a word to me. But we got to be friends, and he took on a very mentor. He had run several small businesses. He'd been in the knife industry forever, so was a mentor in really every sense of the word. He has lived no less than 6 or 7 lives. And recently, I should also say that I spent 2.5 years working with mostly Mussman, but a handful of chefs, where I sent them what I thought a kitchen knife was, and I'd get it back with Sharpie all over it. This is stupid. Round this off. Why did you do this? And over time, there was less and less, this is stupid. And one day, the demo knife had been gone months. And I call Muss. I'm like, hey, man, what's up with the demo knife? He's, what demo knife? Demo knife, the knife I sent you. He goes, oh, my kitchen knife? It's good. And that's how I knew, okay. But it was a 2.5 year process of unlearning knife design and then relearning knife design.
Right.
The difference between push cutting and rock chopping, and why different chefs use one, and that both are equally legitimate, but some chefs will say one is BS, and they'll basically you have to have a blade shape for each.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is a pinch grip. Why you use a pinch grip, that you need to be able to make a knife that formally educated people can pinch grip, but not formally educated people can use different, more traditional grips on. Like it was it was even more complicated than humidors.
Sure.
So there was a long study. There was a long process on that. There was me learning several ways not to be successful in business. And once I learned those, by default, I started to learn how to not fail at business. And then there was a whole manufacturing arc of learning how to go from one-offs to small batches to small production. And when everything finally came together, Ethan and I decided that I was going to start manufacturing the Joy of Cooking line of kitchen knives. And it has been a little bit of there is no more phenomenal name recognition or pristine brand than the Joy of Cooking.
Right.
So I got the invaluable advantage of some name recognition. And over the last year, we have soft opened the line.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that, man.
Thank you.
That's a big deal.
And it's a thin, light blade made from really high-end steel that retails for $200.
Oh, well, I was going to ask you, we talked about $1,500, $3,000 knives, and obviously that's a very small percentage of the population, people that can pay that for a knife. So, like, if people head over to Dogwood Knife and pick up something, like, on average, what are we talking?
So part of what I am pretty proud of is right now everything I have available is U.S. source materials, U.S. manufacture, and my time in Dogwood has basically been a huge research lab. And I took the patterns and the shapes and the materials that worked well in the customs and then just moved them over. So you can now get close to structurally, my production knives are as good as my custom knives. The difference is the custom knives have a hand rub finish and they're finished to third decimal place accuracy of exactly what somebody wanted. And you can get, you want unobtainium? I'll find you unobtainium. You want stabilized wood from the Never Never tree for your handle? I'll find you stabilized wood from the Never Never tree. Like, on the production side, you want black or you want brown?
Right.
You want a saber grind, or if you'd like, I can offer you a saber grind. So the options are limited. The finish
sure
is where you save your money on, but the the same quality materials that I'm using on my custom line. And it is all the things that have gotten proven over 15 years of production of what really works. And now I can do small batch production on that. So to come around to, I am very proud of the steel is called S35VN. It is, for people that are into the knife world, it's got more carbon than 1095. So it takes an incredibly fine edge. It holds an edge really well. But because of the advanced metallurgy, it can be as hard as a razor blade, but as flexible as a saber. So it'll bend well before it ever breaks. So you get really high performance steel that, last time I checked, it is the only production knife in the world that's made of steel of that quality. And you can get it for $200 out the door.
That's awesome. You've explained, obviously, just in the last 3 minutes, some of the differences, because one of my questions was going to be, like, what's the big difference between somebody going to Dogwood and getting them a great kitchen knife versus just picking up a block set of knives at Costco?
So there's a couple of things. First of all, I want to say blade on one side, handle on the other. That's a functioning knife. There's a guy that I go down to the Amazon with, the local contact always likes to say, it's the Indian, not the arrow. I know chefs that I can hand them a $15 old hickory and they can do everything they could do with one of my knives. They also have 75,000 hours of knife use. And they can do a lot more with one of mine. So short version is, for example, no one needs a custom knife. You buy a custom knife because you want it.
Right.
It's like you buy a custom knife for the same reason you buy a Ferrari. Nobody needs a Ferrari. They want one.
Sure. I mean, I can get from here to there in a F-150.
Yeah. But the other example I use is anyone with any education can drive a Chevette and a Corvette, and they can tell the difference between the Chevette and the Corvette. My knives, comparably, they're the Corvettes. They're not Ferraris.
Right.
But they're high performance. They're affordable. Yeah, you can run down to Costco. The balance is going to be off. It's not going to hold an edge as long as you would like. There's going to be performance issues. And a very experienced person with a knife can tell the 30% difference between a production knife and one of my custom knives. And they can appreciate that 30% difference. Not very experienced people, kind of like fine wine, they're not going to notice that little bit of difference. Anybody can tell the difference between. So my blades are 3/32 of an inch of the spine. So they are sometimes a third of the weight as, say, a Wusthof. And some of my chefs, actually, their carpal tunnel syndrome has gotten better from using my knives because they're a third the weight.
Right.
Some of my customers that have got a smaller frame prefer, again, it's a third of the weight. You're lifting and setting down a third of the weight every time. They cut better. They hold an edge. The steel that I use, the way it's tempered, Shamil, when he was at Husk, was doing like 60 hours of knife work a week. He would touch up his knife once a week. In a home kitchen, if you think about 60 hours of actual use, that's months. And that's months before it loses a very keen, I'm going to be careful not to argue and say razor's edge, because you can do some dumb stuff in a kitchen to ruin the edge on a knife. But anybody can tell the difference very quickly between a $20 Costco knife. Another big difference on mine is my goal is for everything I make, including my production stuff, to last 3 generations. A lot of the Costco stuff.
Yeah, it's just not.
Yeah, you're going to get years. But the difference between a $20 knife and my $200 knife, factor of 10. But if you can use it for 3 generations, now you're talking about pennies.
Sure. I would venture to say that when you first started, and like you said, you were consulting with a lot of your chef friends, and they probably had a lot of the same gripes you did, whenever you were learning everything, going through the joy of cooking. And so what didn't they like in the knives that were available to them?
Part of it, actually a big part of it was they didn't know they had any options. Like at that point, it was generally very expensive Japanese knives that were very high maintenance and had, to Western trained chefs, very uncomfortable, very poor ergonomic handles. In the blade culture in Japan, handles are considered almost disposable. The blade is the entire focus, and then when your handle gets beat up, you take it off, and there's a bin of handles, and you just go get a new one and you stick it on. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but so there was very expensive, high-maintenance Japanese knives with uncomfortable handles, or there were big, clunky, the heat treat and the metallurgy wasn't great Western knives. 90s, 2010s, cooking was getting cool. There were some cooking shows. People started to get some options, and the chefs were like, I want something with better balance. I want something that holds an edge longer. I want something that has got good return coming off the cutting board when I rock chop. And that, almost every knife has some degree of curvature at the belly, the edge.
Mm-hmm.
And where that curve is and its shape determines when it comes in contact with a cutting board, does it flatten out and stick, or will you get a roll in return? So it's an efficient.
That.
And guys that rock chop want a lot of that. Guys that push cut want less return, but more of a rolling motion to it.
Yeah, like when you're going through parsley or whatever.
So early on, it was, your curve is just bad. And then it was, oh, wait, we can dial this in so that it really performs. And then it got to be your edge retention. And there's so many variables. Everybody gets focused on the steel. And that's like focusing on the flour for your cake. It's a vital part. If you have crappy flour, you're going to make a crappy cake. But you can have great flour and your oven's too cold.
Still make a bad cake.
Yeah. And one of the little nuances is you've got your primary bevel, what everybody sees as the angle that comes down to form the edge.
Mm-hmm.
Frequently, if you look very closely, there's another step in the angle.
Mm-hmm.
What angle that is, how high that angle comes up, what is the width of that edge can determine not just how well it cuts, but how robust the edge is, how quickly it turns and rolls and becomes dull.
Mm-hmm.
So then it started getting to be, hey, this is possible. We can get more. So it started out from, I want better than this knife that doesn't really fit my hand. And then it moved into, okay, now you've made something as good as what's available on the market. And I've said, well, we can do better. We can make it thinner. We can make it lighter. And some of that was, okay, whoa, you've gone way too thin. Because in some cases, the knife was strong enough that it held up to getting pounded against the cutting board, but it had too much flex. So it cut really well, but there would be flex in the blade while they were doing things. So they were willing to add a little more weight to keep the spine rigid. Mm-hmm. So then it became a back and forth of bracketing the problem, kind of overcorrect and bring it back into, okay, this is what's right. Little things like that I never thought of since a chef tends to pinch grip at the edge, the spine of a knife is frequently a 90-degree angle. Well, if that's the case, that's two really hard edges that you're pinching on.
Mm-hmm.
So once you've got every other shape of the knife right, then you start looking at some of the ergonomics of spots where it doesn't matter if you round the edge over, spots that it really does, so you don't get calluses, so you don't tear up your finger.
Yeah.
Then it got into the blades right, but the angle of the handle compared to interaction to the blade and how the blade moves. So if the blade is rocking at a certain angle, there can be a complementary or a counteractive angle on the handle where you're getting the right action you want out of the blade, but because of the angle of the handle, it's uncomfortable or you're not getting control. So then it came back from dialing back and forth of, if we have this angle of the blade, we need the handle at this angle so that they interact correctly.
That's just a lot of super technical information, which, of course, the guy who's putting in 60 hours in his kitchen, it matters to him.
And part of the advantage on that was doing the customs. So there's several chefs that I have worked with that the deal was, I'm going to make a knife for you, free or at cost. And what I get out of it is an education in designing that knife.
Mm-hmm.
And frequently in those cases, it took a year to a year and a half to get to the finished product, 3 to 6 prototypes to get there. Because it would be, we make what we think we want, you use it for 3 months, we dial it back and forth.
Right.
So when I was doing the customs, I was getting a PhD level education in different knife shapes. And that started to give me data points so that when I started moving into larger, spec knives and that kind of stuff, I went from being able to dial the knife into exactly what this guy wants to opening up those data points and going, okay, this is what will work for 70% of the population. Or I can split it down to, this will work for people that push cut, and that's half the people using a knife. And this will work for people that rock chop, and that's the other half. So then it just came down to this is the right knife for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I got really deep into the minutia, but then was able to back out that perspective and use all of that data to build the Budweiser of a knife that that fit. It may not fit anyone perfectly, but it fits a lot of people really well.
Sure. You've probably covered this in bits and pieces here and there, and I just wanted to ask, kind of like I did, to give us the 30,000 foot view of rugby. Give us the same view just of the process from start to finish of making a knife.
So there's 2 distinct methods, stock removal and forging. Forging is what you see on Forged in Fire. And it is sculpture insofar as you take a mound of clay and you push it into a shape that you want. The limiting factor to forging is there is modern steels that are that for practical purposes you can't forge. Yes, there are oxygen-free environments, but it's not practical to make a knife. NASA may forge stuff that way because it's practical for rockets, but it's just not practical. So when I say it can't be forged, I don't mean it's not humanly impossible. I mean, it's just not practical. But those metals have really high performance. And that is where stock removal comes in. And the analogy I use for that is I take a bar of steel and I take away everything that's not a knife. It's like working in wood or marble. So I will start with a bar of steel, sometimes a plate, but for this conversation, a bar of steel that's approximately the width that I want the knife. And then I cut it into the rough shape, and I use a 2-inch by 72-inch belt grinder with 2.5 horsepower motor and these really aggressive ceramic abrasives. I draw out the knife. I grind away everything entirely by hand, but I grind away everything that's not the knife. Then I'll turn it 90 degrees and I'll put the angles on the blade. And then I have a kiln that it will adjust temperature 100 times a minute, and it is accurate plus or minus 2 degrees at 2,000 degrees. Because back to using the cake analogy, everybody focuses on the steel, but the heat treat and the tempering, which or two different processes are every bit as vital as your oven. As you heat steel to certain degrees, the molecular structure of the steel literally changes. And how you treat it at different temperatures will affect, do you have a really dense, strong molecular structure, or is it more open and prone to breaking? You can have multiple structures in the same blade, and everywhere there's a change, that can be a weak point in a blade. So once I grind the rough shape, I heat treat and temper the blade, and that's what makes it hard and flexible. I then will go to, I've got enough material for 500 plus different handles. I'll pick a handle material, and that can be, I got some chef's coats and aprons from the French Laundry and had somebody impregnate it with epoxy, compress it, and cure it. So it's a material called micarta that is incredibly hard and durable, but it is literally made out of linen coats and aprons. I've got some stabilized wood that was carbon dated to, I think, 3700 BC. Like any sort of weirdness I want, but I will then attach that material to the handle, and that can be pins and epoxy, that can be bolts, depends on the use. And then I'll go back to the grinder and I will rough carve what the shape of the handle is going to be. And then I use files and sandpaper to shape the handle down to its final shape. And that's on the full handmade side.
Yeah.
And in there is grinding and sanding to make it polished, to make it perfectly flat, to make it perfectly true. Depending on how the knife's going to be used and who it's made for, I may remove weight from what's called the tang. That's the metal part that's in the handle.
Right.
To change the balance front to back. I may, instead of using a carbon fiber pin to hold the handle on, I may use a steel pin, which again, to adjust the weight front to back. And then, like I said, that's my spec knives. That's the stuff that's fully handmade. The production knives, I rent production time from larger companies. So a large production company that may make 100,000 blades a year, I will send them my specs on steel, heat treat, shape, etc. And they will use production time on their facilities to make blades to my spec. I'll quality control them. And then I actually have a guy here in Cowpens that does all the machining for my production handles. And then those, it's just a simple bolt up quality control.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why the mid-tech stuff can be $700 to $2,000, and the production stuff is $200.
Nice. I've got a guy coming on in a couple of weeks. It'll be an interesting conversation juxtaposed to this one. He's his name's Daniel Cown. Does Cown Fine Folders. He lives out.
Yeah, I know him.
Yeah, so I'll be interested to talk to him because I know making a folding knife is a different animal.
Making a folding knife is as different to making a fixed blade as making an outdoor knife was to a kitchen knife. Like, it's an entirely new set of variables. And in a folding knife, it's all of those variables plus they move.
Yeah.
So they've got to all move in the right relation to each other.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he's a funny dude.
Yeah. Done a little getting into the budding comedian stuff. We'll talk about all that. All right, at this point, I'm just going to stop for a minute and say that if you are looking to buy or sell a home here in beautiful Greenville, because, of course, everybody is, and if you ask Dan, we're all rednecks and we're all backwards and there's no need to move here.
Yeah, but if you're here and you're looking to upgrade, it is a phenomenal time.
Yeah. People are moving to the upstate here in droves, and maybe you want to buy a home and grab the equity that's going to come in the next decade as the upstate explodes. Maybe you want to capitalize on the need for housing and sell your home for top dollar. As a realtor with C. Dan Joyner and a member of Nexus Group, I'm here to help. We offer a personalized experience, paying great attention to your needs. a service-oriented mindset, expert market analysis, and proven results. From downtown condos to spacious family homes, we'll guide you through every step of the way. Let our experience work for you. You can call me today at 864-207-2316 or visit my website, Chris Strother, that's Strother, chrisstrother.cdanjoiner.com. All right, we're going to move into the last section of the podcast. One of the things...
You put all that time into show notes, and then I just completely ignored them, didn't I?
Don't worry about it, man. I just send the show notes out ahead of time for people just to get I want you to be familiar with, the guided conversation that's there,
We do the same thing on the Knife Perspective podcast to help people feel a little more comfortable. There's not going to be any surprises. We're not looking to put you in an awkward spot.
No, absolutely not. I'm here to have a nice conversation, show interest in what you do, help connect you with the community. And we run rabbit trails, talk about things that aren't in the notes, but this is just kind of the guide, But one of the things I know about you, only because I follow you on social media, is that you take pretty much annual trips to the Amazon. And you said you've taken 9 to date. I think that's what you said.
Yeah, 9 or 10.
Something like that. So how did that get started?
So I used to co-host a podcast called the Equipped to Door podcast. And it was an outdoor bushcrafting survivalist. They brought me on to do a couple of segments as the knife guy. And then we kind of clicked, and I think I was there for about a year and a half. And one of the people that was on the Equipped to Endure, they did the podcast, but they also did education. Team members would go out to gatherings and that kind of stuff and teach classes. And one of the guys was this gentleman named Joe Flowers, who an absolutely fascinating individual, who started writing for Backpacker magazine when he was 13 or 14. Nobody knew how old he was. But he was a subject matter expert at 14. He also designs knives. Where I have a company and I manufacture, he designs and then licenses his designs to other companies. But short version is, if you have read an outdoor magazine or have used a knife in the outdoors, there's a nearly 100% chance you've either read one of Joe's articles or used one of his knives. You just didn't know it. And he was also a herpetologist and an entomologist, studied bugs, and was an adventurer, and wound up doing, matter of fact, on, I think it's Netflix, there's a show called The Expedition from Hell, and it talks about an expedition that Joe was on. He didn't run, but he was a member on, that he got a lot of contacts in South America when the expedition just absolutely collapsed. And there's a lot of stuff that they don't say in the documentary, but Joe held a lot of people together, made a lot of contacts, and in the process started talking to a guy that ran research trips out of Colombia. And Joe's like, hey, non-researchers might want to do this. So Joe created an outfitting service, and we interviewed him on the Equipped to Endure podcast. And during the podcast, I was like, hey, where do I sign the check? I want to do this stuff. I had grown up in the North Georgia woods, but this was an entirely new environment. I was down. And after the show, Joe and I had never met. And after the show, I'm like, okay, so seriously, where do I send the check? And he's like, oh, I thought you were doing a bit. I'm like, no, I'm in. So I went down on that first show, or first trip. At some point before we left, it dawns on Joe that he didn't know anything about me. So he's like, hey, let's get on a Skype call. And we wind up staying up till like 3:00 in the morning, designing a knife for Amazon X. It's called the Piranha. I still make some, but we went from strangers to an 8-hour Skype call where we're designing knives, and we just clicked. He was competitive in MMA and ran a dojo, as well as doing the outdoor stuff. His wife is a dentist. Joe had a very similar background to me. Was the stay-at-home dad that also quartermanned for some semi-pro MMA fights. Like he was that juxtaposition. We really bonded. I went on that first trip. I loved it. I went on the next trip. And then at some point, Joe's like, all right, here's the deal. You're not a guide, but you know more than most of the guys on the trip. How about you do more helping out and do less having to pay full price? And it turned into, during the acclimation phase, I would help guys out. I'd help guys set up their camp. I would be in camp to kind of help people out. And I loved the Amazon because it was an environment I was completely unfamiliar with.
Sure. Yeah.
It was like being a kid going back to the woods. Everything was new. Little element of danger, but a huge element of being able to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And then at one point, my youngest 8th grade year, my oldest freshman year, Alex and Jack, I told my wife, I'm like, I had made friends with all the contacts down there. And I told my wife, I want to take the boys down. I checked with Joe. He's like, don't worry about it. Just use the contacts. I don't need my cut. And she was not a fan. I'm like, look, we recently moved here. They're about to change schools. First day, new school, trying to figure out where to sit in the lunchroom is not nearly as stressful as we got tracked by a jaguar for the last half of today.
Right.
And at that point, I'm like, the stress of a math test is nowhere compared to if we don't catch fish today, we don't eat.
Mm-hmm.
But with a safety net of, I'm going to be there, some guys. And that's when she was like, okay, I'm not happy about it, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So I took the boys down for a trip, and now Joe, and I probably should tag, Bushcraft Global is the name of the outfitting service.
All right, we'll tag them when this comes out.
And they've got a phenomenal relationship with the Matisse tribe, which they're a Brazilian tribe. A lot of people don't know that Colombia and Brazil all kind of meet right in one little corner of Colombia on the Amazon basin, and that's a little town called Leticia is their home base. But the Matisse made contact with the outside world in 73, 75. I was talking to one of the Matisse who remembered when he found out that airplanes were not giant, shiny, feathered birds.
Wow.
They had seen airplanes fly over, but they had had no contact with the outside world. He remembers the first time he saw both a metal cooking pot and a metal cutting tool. And for education, these guys live what most of us play at.
Right.
They are almost so advanced that I can't learn hunting from them, but I can learn how to walk from them. That we will go out on trips, and I am not even trying to wrap my head around some of their tracking techniques. I'm just looking at their foot placement and their balance.
Mm-hmm.
And it completely changed how I was in the woods. Different techniques. They share some cultural things out there. There's a video out there somewhere on Instagram. I think when it hit 1 million views and comments got a little political, it's out there somewhere, but of me being caned.
Mm.
And part of this Matisse culture is if you want honey, you're going to get stung by bees. Like from a very early age, they condition the members of, I'm going to use the word tribe. It's not a perfect translation, but of their people. They train their people to be indifferent to pain.
Right.
That when you take a lash from the cane, if you do the, yeah, that didn't hurt, give me another. That's as embarrassing to them as if you had cried. You should be completely indifferent. And a lot of their cultural ceremonies are about pain is just hunger, pain, sad, happy. those are all the same things, and you're going to feel them. And
yeah,
so it's I don't have the words to tell you how much learning potential there is.
And it's a totally different worldview, a totally different perspective on life and how we do things. I was going to ask you that, obviously going down to the Amazon, you're going to see and experience things that we just don't see and experience here. We live in Greenville, and it's a city, and so what's some of those wild things you've seen down there?
That's a difficult question, but I will say, so first trip in, like second or third day we're in, a line of marching ants comes through camp. And there you keep your kitchen well away from your sleeping area. Because bullet ants are bad.
Right.
They're really bad if they're in your sleeping area. But for like 3 days, we just had to be very conscious to step over this one ant wide line of ants. And as long as you didn't break the line, they were completely indifferent to you. If you broke the line, terrible and painful things were going to happen. But for 3 days, we had this incredibly dangerous line running through our camp, but you just stepped over it, and how quickly you became aware of it, but no longer. A lot of people say that tarantulas are individual lone species. We accidentally set up a significant part of our camp at a tarantula colony. And again, how quickly we were constantly aware of where they are and where they stepped, especially at night, but they didn't mess with us. We didn't mess with them.
Kind of a live and let live kind of a thing.
And how close you could be to something that dangerous. And as long as you respected it, you were okay. Some of it was all the Naked and Afraid and the outdoor shows. You hear all about trapping and that sort of thing. So a couple of days in, they're like, okay, we're going to set up a trap line. So we're there with 4 local Indians who are our guides, because we're on their preserve a lot of times. One of whom walked out of the jungle when he was 22 because he had heard about a town and he wanted to see it. So he walked 50 kilometers through the jungle to get to this town, Leticia, because he wanted to see what a town was. Wound up staying, learned to speak Spanish, and was now a guide for our local contact. So, I mean, he was a real deal, 22 years of his life living on what you could catch. And we laid out a trap line, and by day 4 or 5, we had gotten the equivalent of 2 chickens worth of protein. And that was 14 people working hard all day. Fishing, we caught fish every day with very little effort. One of the things that really pounded into my head was...
What are you fishing with? I mean, what's your setup?
So on that trip...
I mean, it's obviously not what we think about. It's not a rod and reel.
So you can. On that trip, I didn't, because we were fishing a lot of tributaries. So there was a lot of overhang.
Be difficult to cast.
Difficult to cast, and you never really needed to cast more than 20 feet. There was a lot of, you'd go down the creek and you'd find bends or deep spots, and you'd fish that, and you'd get 2 or 3 fish, and then you'd move on. So a lot of it was, I was using the equivalent of a cane pole. There's a specific tree there that has very similar, it's very long fiber, it's thin, it's light, it's got good play at the tip. So you cut it, you trim off the bark, and you'd fish like a cane pole. And there were some techniques about either using a little wrist roll, or you could hold your hook and hold the cane and bend the cane back and then let go and kind of slingshot.
Right.
Or frequently all you had to do is just dip your line in. And we were catching piranha, couple of species of catfish. Oh, that's the best thing I learned about piranha is if you're not dead, they're not a problem.
Oh, really?
Contrary to all the stuff.
All the horror movies.
Yeah. I mean, I swam in the same little pools that we caught piranha. Occasionally, in some of the big areas, you would be swimming on a makeshift dock and people would be catching piranha. They are basically brim or crappie.
Right.
With a really bad attitude. But they're carrion eaters.
Yeah, they clean up all the dead stuff.
Yeah, you can swim through a school of piranha and you might get a nip or two. Like when I was bathing, shocker, it was very hot in the Amazon. And especially in the evenings, the creeks were cool. So you might lather up and rinse in the creek and just soak for a minute. And kind of like brim, if you're leaning up against some rocks in the water, you get a little nip.
Yep.
You might get a little nip every now and then, but if you're actively swimming, piranha will not mess with you. You throw something dead in the water and it's like the movies.
Yeah.
So that was a cool thing that I learned. But basically cane pole fishing, there, two things. The jungle is hyper competitive, so everything grows fast. So you want to use stewardship. You need to cut a tree down. There's two of them close together. You cut the less healthy one down. But on residual trips, we would pass through a campsite that I knew we used the year before, and there'd be a tree 6 inches in diameter growing out of the fire pit. In 1 year, a tree 6 inches in diameter and 60 feet tall has popped up. So you always have to be a good steward, but things replenish faster. And since we were fishing small creeks where there's only a couple of feet, we could set up basically little spring traps. So you might go down one side of the creek, setting up some basically spring-loaded fishing rods, and then fish back down. And then on your way back down, you check your lines.
That's awesome.
Because we're feeding 12 people on, small catfish and brim.
Right.
But the lesson I got on trapping is for living in the woods. Fishing is for surviving. Just because the calories in, calories out. You spend so many calories setting up and working a trap line. It's hard to get those calories back.
Right.
Fishing, you don't have to put a lot of calories out, and you can get. I learned how to eat a whole roasted fish, because they'll just roast them on the fire. They'll take the scales off, roast them, and then set them down. And there's a trick where you can take a fork or your fingers and you start at the spine and peel the meat away. And when you're done, it looks like the Looney Tunes cartoon,
right?
Where there's just the spine.
That's funny. It sounds like an amazing experience. An amazing experience. Valuable memories. A very different but necessary education, and just also an eye-opening realization of just how difficult the world can be whenever you're doing this, coming from our civilized, everything is right here at our fingertips.
I think a couple of the biggest takeaways that I would want to say is the first time I went down, so we flew into Bogota, had an overnight in Bogota, and Joe's like, hey, this is going to be your last hot shower for a while. So take a hot shower. We get down to Leticia, where they've got running water, but it's not hot water. So you spend a couple of days, you get jungle acclimation classes, and man, freaking cold showers. This is, and then I went out into the jungle and was taking baths in creeks and came back. I'm like, wow, this shower is great. Who needs hot water? Like, you don't need hot water. A shower's great. That's all you need.
Sure.
And then, yes, the jungle was an entirely new environment, and I loved that it was dangerous things that I didn't know it was. But I think it was my fourth trip, when I was starting to help out, and I was still being really careful. And the local contact's like, hey, where you from? You have poisonous snakes? It's like, yeah. Rattlesnakes, copperheads, some water moccasins. He's like, oh, yeah, no, that's about the same number we have. You got poisonous spiders? It's like, yeah, black widows, brown recluse, actually wolf spider. That's a really unpleasant bite. Like, he's like, yeah, no, that's what we've got. He's like, back home, do you stick your hand in a hole that you can't see the bottom of? No. He goes, man, it's the same thing here. And that was such a moment for me that it's different dangers, but I'm dealing with dangers back home.
Right.
They're just the ones that I know. Same rules apply. Before you sit down, look carefully. If you can't see the bottom of the hole, don't stick a hand or foot in there.
That's smart.
If you don't know what it is, don't touch it.
That seems pretty common sense.
And all of a sudden, all of these very dangerous things just became cautionary.
Yeah, it didn't seem quite so dangerous anymore. Just
you had to be equally cautious, but it wasn't. And like I've got hobbit feet. I wear a 9.5 6E. Like trying to find boots for me is a joke. And down there, they wanted us to wear rubber boots to protect our feet. And they were like clown shoes for me. And how freeing it was for me when I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to wear sandals. And side note, if you go down on a trip, your first couple of trips, they're going to make you wear the boots. Like when I'm going barefoot or wearing sandals, the local contact is like, look, he's been down here 10 times.
You've earned it.
Well, he's also an idiot. And he knows that when he gets hurt, and he's going to get hurt, it's on him.
Yeah.
But I could move so much better.
You sure?
Things that I was going to trip on or that were going to catch up on my boot, I could feel them. And I got to the point where I went barefoot. And I could feel that and adjust my step. And all of a sudden, I was moving better. Because I was moving better, my balance was better. I wasn't falling. I was seeing more. I was doing more.
Yeah.
So realizing that you need to be careful, but everywhere you've ever been has been dangerous.
Yep.
Home is no less dangerous. It's just danger you're comfortable with.
Makes sense. I think most people are vastly different today than they were 30 years ago. Some of that for very obvious reasons. But the knife making, chef consulting, joy of cooking, knife maker, Amazon traveling, Dan Eastland is not the same Dan Eastland that had to be the stay-at-home dad in the early days of his family. And that's a jungle of a whole different kind. But by what you wrote to me, it sounds like all of that is like, how has all of that made you who you are?
Yes. So if we wind it back to, from the angry guy who developed some confidence, developed how to communicate, that was kind of a first step. And then I guess really what all of this has done, what kind of the repeating pattern for me has been, I've continued to put myself in a position where I don't know what I'm doing. I am in a new, unknown environment. And in the process of learning how to operate in that environment and then change the environment, operate in the environment, I have developed a comfort with who I am. I've developed a comfort with just because I don't know now doesn't mean I can't figure out. I've developed a comfort in that, yeah, part of this might go unpleasant, but we can figure out, I've learned most of the ways not to get hurt and die. So we can stay in between those lines. So really, I mean, I can talk about my development as a person and my emotional development, but really, I mean, there was a moment, so it took about a week before Jack could come out of the NICU. And by the time he was out of the prenatal intensive care unit, and he had to be on a light bed, and we had to get some medical equipment delivered, and we finally get him home, and it's like 1 a.m, and he literally his body could fit in the palm of my hand.
Wow.
And he needs a diaper change. And it was this moment between my wife and I look at her, I'm like, okay, so how do I change a diaper? She says, what do you mean? Said, you're the woman, you babysat, you know these things. She said, I didn't sit infants. I've never had to change a diaper. And we both have this moment of panic. And I remember going, okay, crackheads can do this. Neanderthals figured out how to do this. I know some idiots that are parents. We can figure this out. Pull out the diaper and look at it. And it's kind of got the hourglass shape. I'm like, okay, here's how it goes. Get him cleaned up, get the diaper changed. I'm like, okay. And that was kind of the start of the process of Friday, I was one place. Monday, I was in an entirely another place, and I got to figure this stuff out. And that has been a recurring theme that perhaps I would have benefited from doing a little more research before I put myself in the situation, but having to constantly figure it out gave me some comfort of not knowing that, okay, I don't know, but we can figure that out. And that applies in a phenomenal number of places.
Yeah, 100%.
And I don't need to be the smartest or the strongest or the best. I can be the worst, but pretty confident that I can get good.
I got a couple more questions for you, then we'll wrap it up. And just listening to your journey and everything, I mean, I think you've got some really valuable insights because you've been through a lot, seen a lot, done a lot. And I've woken up to this, as have I think a lot of people in the last several years. But we'll circle back a little bit to the education system and tie it into today. But our current education system kind of treats everybody like a one size fits all. But it's not. And I talked about this recently on a different podcast that is dropping soon. And I know school is difficult for you, and a couple of names that you will know for guys that had difficulty in school. My friend Jason Jansen, our mutual friend Chef Craig Coons, and I would consider all three of you successful people. But you wrote to me that you value playing in the woods, and just looking at our children today and what's going on with them, even technologically, and the social media and the screens and the this and the that versus your life and then trips to the Amazon and playing in the woods. I mean, how do we just riff on that a few minutes and tie those things together?
And it's going to be a cultural struggle. The downside to us growing as a people, cities get bigger. There's a certain percentage of every orchard that's got bad apples, and the bigger the orchard, the more bad apples you're going to have. It is going to become a challenge. But there is a value, especially as a young person, to run barefoot through the woods with an old Baldo knife and no adult supervision. That when you're hungry, you find something to eat, or you remember to take something with you. You go hungry a couple of days and you'll remember to make a sandwich next time.
Right.
There is a value in, you need a shelter and you make one. And the value is, I can make a shelter. I don't need somebody else to make the shelter for me.
Self-sufficiency.
Not just self-sufficiency, but the mindset of somebody should do something about that does not work in the woods because you're the only someone.
Right.
So it helps develop the mindset of, instead of somebody needs to, how am I going to, or I need to. There is the freedom of movement and expression of when it's just a couple of people you're close with or nobody else. There is the education of, if you're not paying attention and you step on a sharp stick, it hurts. There is remembering that for you to live, something else has got to die.
Mm-hmm.
And that the need to respect that.
Yeah.
That don't become callous about your life, that you had to sacrifice, but other things have had to sacrifice, and honor that sacrifice, accept it. And then again, I was a little bit of an unusual kid, but man, a quiet, still place for me to think. And I remember the two lessons of the woods are so quiet and there's no stimuli. There's nothing to tell me what I should be, what I should think of myself, what I want, what I need. All of that influence is coming internally. And then the next big realization that the woods are never quiet, that you're never alone, that there's always something there.
Right.
And I think all of that combines to lay the groundwork for a successful person. Clearly it's not the only method.
Sure.
But that mindset of independence, some resilience, some understanding at a basic level of how the world works. I was really fortunate. There was a significant piece of land that I was, as a young man, given free rein to. And I guess the confidence too of a hand line and a pocket knife and a book of matches. And first of all, I'd had the education that I could safely make a fire, but go play in the woods, catch a bass, couple of crappie, a brim, cook them, eat them. I was fine.
Mm-hmm.
I was in, I guess this is probably important too. Sorry, I don't mean to ramble, but learning that you're not in control. When you're in an environment as big as the true woods, you're not in control. In smaller environments, in cities, in homes, in areas where helicopter moms and everything is policed, you can get the illusion that you're in control.
Right.
You are no more in control than a leaf in a creek. There's some things that you can do to guide.
Yeah.
You can develop some experience and see rough times coming. You can react. But in the end, there are far more powerful forces around you, and they're going to have the final say.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. And I think you probably answered this a few minutes ago, just talking about your life experiences and things that have taught you. But I'll ask it in a different way in case you want to add anything else. But because I know you want to talk about dealing with life, and I think we've kind of covered that. But you said you mentioned your first son, a preemie, and now you're doing the stay-at-home dad. Other challenges along the way that there is for everyone. So how do you handle life?
Some would argue not well. So back to none of us are the person we were 30 years ago.
Yeah.
The guy talking to you right now handles life a whole lot better than the guy 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So a overwhelming mantra that may have done as much damage as good, but has been vital to me is, there's lots of ways to say it, but you've only got to be able to get up one more time, then they can knock you down. Yeah, your business failed and you are in a really bad bind, and that sucks, but it doesn't have to be the end. I got it from the Army. It's cliche, but embrace the suck.
Yeah.
It can either break you or you can decide you love it.
Mm-hmm.
That you're not really beat until you lay down. Yeah. And I have been a part of a couple of failed businesses, and that was That was pretty brutal. I have decided to cut my own path, only to find out that was a whole lot of extra work to get to the same place.
Mm-hmm.
The upside to some of my independent thought is I've got some intellectual property. I've invented some things. I've been able to figure out the better mousetrap, and there have been some huge advantages to that. That also means that I had to try it a different way and find out that, well, Edison's got the perfect analogy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It took 1,000 tries to light a light bulb. Well,
yeah.
How did you keep going after all of those failures? Oh, I never failed. I just learned 999 ways not to light a light bulb.
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. I wasn't quite prepared for the question.
No, that's okay.
Accept your failures and learn from them. Accept your victories and learn from them. Because a lot of us, they can accept one or the other, but they struggle with both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess I have the advantage of being so naive for so long is I always believed I would figure it out. I'm in a bad situation. And I have been on one of my Amazon trips. I decided to stay for a couple of extra days. There was a local knife maker I was going to work with. Everybody else in the group had left. I was in no way the responsibility of the outfitting company or anybody down there. I was totally on my own. And the outfitter was going to send somebody down, or the knife maker was going to send a friend down on a motorcycle to pick me up. I'm like, I'm fine, man. I can walk down the trail. All right, I'm going to send a friend down to walk with you. Man, I literally just spent 2 weeks running barefoot with the natives in the jungle. I'm going to head down in a little while. And I'm walking out of my cabin, and I've got my possibles bag and my machete are hanging on the back of a chair. And keep in mind, I used to teach outdoors classes. And I remember thinking, I don't want to look like I was scared or a punk to walk down this trail. Well, in the year's time since the last time I had been to this particular area, they had changed the trails. And I spent 8 to 10 hours legitimately lost in the Amazon jungle. I had a cigarette lighter, a half pack of cigarettes. Nobody else can see it, but a knife about that size. And a little bit of this stuff they call mumbe. And that's it. And my arrogance got me into trouble. I passed on help that I should have accepted. I left behind resources that I should have taken. Once I knew that I was in trouble, rather than sit down and wait for help to come, I decided, no, I got myself in, I can get myself out. And it got to the point that I was starting to collect random materials and preparing for, all right, I'm at about just starting stage 2 dehydration. At this point, I'm going to have to start drinking water, which I know will in a short while start inducing vomiting and diarrhea.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a cycle. Making plans for that. Okay, I'm going to be here at least overnight. And fortunately, I stumbled out into an agricultural field where there was a young family. No problem. I had an iPhone. I had an offline translating app. I'm still confident that I'll be fine. Turns out that offline translating apps work really well if the person inputting the information is not brutally dyslexic and can barely spell English. And the person reading it has more than a 5th grade education. And there was some back and forth, and I don't know exactly what was said because my Spanish is horrible, but I know when a wife says, look, I have stuff to do, just take care of this guy. And we're walking into the field, and there is a dicey moment because we don't step onto a trail but I've got a plan. I'm confident. Turns out the guy was walking me into a trail a little broken Spanish. I picked up some details, started walking. I understood right. I understood a couple other things, followed a trail, came into a little village, and literally a village. And it was like Dawn of the Dead. Nobody's in this village. I mean, nobody's there. And being very cautious, I don't want to sneak up on anybody. So I'm, hola, hola. I'm walking down in the middle of the street, very clearly not sneaking around. And some kid walks out in tracksuit pants with a smartphone and an earbud. With pretty good English, who offers me water and helps clarify the directions for me. And I walk out onto the highway. And once I get to the highway, which I had spent the last 6 hours trying to find, and I'll go ahead and add that we had learned from some of the indigenous that there's 2 reasons you get lost in the jungle. There's 2 spirits. One is kind of a trickster spirit, and the other is kind of gnome spirits. And if you've come to attention of the trickster spirit, or you've offended the gnome spirits who are kind of keepers of the jungles, they will make you get lost. And to get outside of the attention of the trickster spirit, there's a certain type of palm you can find, and you cut a section. And there's a series of cuts that you can make that will make an interlocking chain out of the bark of this palm. And the tradition is you cut that and you set it down in your trail opened up as a chain. And the trickster spirit who is following you, that's messing with you to keep you lost, will see this, and while he's trying to figure out how you carved an interlocking chain from a single piece, he's distracted and you can get away. The other side of that is it forces you to stop, sit down, perform a task, be successful at that task, and then lift your head back up, having calmed down and got some confidence. Well, I looked around and I couldn't find any of those palm trees, and I was not going to step foot off the trail. I mean, that was the one stupid thing I wasn't going to do. So I gave a little tobacco offering to the Duende, the jungle spirits, and suddenly remembered that on my watch, somehow I had forgotten that for the last 4 or 5 hours that there's a compass on my watch. And while facing the interstate, I shot an azimuth to help this YouTube guy set up his camera because of the arc of the sun and the way the lighting was going to be. So I checked my heading, and I'm like, well, that's weird. My compass is 180 degrees off. And I take 2 steps. I'm like, wait a minute. Which one's more likely? The Lost Gringo is 180 degrees off, or the compass is?
Trust your tools.
And that's when I have I've been walking for 5 hours in the wrong direction. So turn around. But I finally find the highway, and thank God, once I get to the highway, it's a binary decision, north or south.
Right.
I just got to figure out, am I before or after kilometer unce? And as I'm standing there trying to figure out, I see a car coming down. Local contact is Goran. I'm like, man, that looks like Goran's car. Wow, the car that looks like Goran's car is stopping awfully aggressively. The woman driving the car that looks like Goran's car looks just like his. Oh, it is his wife.
Unbelievable.
8 hours of lost in the jungle, and I walk out in front of the contact's wife. And the double side to that is my arrogance and my confidence got me in trouble. But my confidence of stay calm, work the problem, got me out of it.
That's the lesson.
Yeah, I guess all of this should come down to the key is just keep working the problem.
Right.
You just keep working the problem until you find a solution.
Yeah. I read a quote recently that stuck in my head that said, the winner is just a loser who tried one more time.
I like that. The kind of the thing that I came up with, because I've been through some rough times. Stay-at-home dad, had its own issues. No one's with a person for 27 years without there being issues.
Sure.
Anyone that's had 2 teenagers at the house at the same time knows there's issues. Like I said, we've had financials ups and downs. And the two pieces of advice that, I always kind of heard that stuck with me was, the first rule of holes is if you find yourself in one, stop digging.
Mm-hmm.
My dad used to tell me that about knowing when to shut up, because I just didn't know when to shut up. And the other is, I'm pretty sure it's a Winston Churchill quote, but when you're going through hell, don't stop.
Keep going.
And I have distilled that down to those two pieces of advice. And I'm now in a position where I'm just trying to figure out, am I in a hole or am I going through hell?
Right.
I just need to figure out, do I stop or do I keep going?
That's good.
Because in life, that's all it is.
Yeah.
You're either trying to figure out, stop wasting materials, or, dear Lord, don't stop just before you succeed.
Yeah. That's great.
So,
all right, man. Well, let's wrap this show up. This has been extremely fun. One last time, the website for Dogwood
is www.dogwoodcustomknives.com.
And Instagram handle?
Dogwood Custom Knives.
Dogwood Custom Knives. One thing I always ask all my guests is just for a couple of interview recommendations. People you think it would be good for me to bring on the show.
So do you know, outdoor and food industry is my guys. There is Chef Ralph, who is a fascinating individual that's lived several lives. Christian, who was a cheesemonger. He's a Dutchman, came to the States, became a cheesemonger. He's got a fascinating story. Neil from Discommon.
Okay.
One of his many claims to fame is he has the world's only street legal Formula One car that you will occasionally see him driving around town to get groceries.
Okay. It's
a blue 1960s shark body, fully track ready Formula One car.
Dude, that's wild.
He is, I won't give away too much, but
yeah, sure.
Scotsman, came to Clemson, got an engineering degree, decided he wanted to get into glasses. Went to Oakley, and they flat out told him, you have no experience whatsoever. Why would we hire you? He said, you are the world's premier manufacturer of glasses, and I'm an intelligent engineer. You can teach me anything I need to know. They said, you're hired, you're going to the R&D department. And he spent 8 years R&D at Oakley.
That's awesome.
And that is not even the most bizarre story.
Yeah, I'll just I'll keep those guys' recommendation on file, and you can just I'll just email. Yeah, okay, awesome. Look, if you are in need of my services as a realtor or with the Cigar Box, you can get me direct at 864-207-2316. You can visit mobileCigarBox.com to check me out there. You can follow me on Instagram at mobileCigarBox or at Sunday Afternoon Smokes. If you'd like to set up a consultation with me as a real estate professional, shoot me an email to cstrother@cdanjoyner.com. You've been listening to Sunday Afternoon Smokes. I appreciate it. Share it with your friends, your family, and on your socials, and just share it everywhere. Dan, thanks for carving out several hours of your day. I've had a great time.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I mean, God knows I love nothing more than talking about me. But, truly, thank you for the opportunity. And if you don't mind, I also have a podcast, theknifeperspective.com. It's very niche, but if you're a knife guy, it's myself and another knife maker, and we dive, every episode is an expert in some part of knives.
Okay.
And we deep dive.
So you have a website, knifeperspective.com?
Correct.
And they can, what is it on Spotify, Apple?
It's on all the platforms.
It's on all of them?
I think we're at 110, 115 episodes.
Okay.
Some of them are just my co-host doing get to know you with other makers. Some of them are with the both of us, and we deep dive into some niche. We had... when the Smithsonian has a question about a Bowie knife, this is the guy they call.
Oh, wow.
And he came on and talked about how the Bowie knife became what it was.
Yeah.
It's nerdy, but if that's your thing. And then if you can't find any of my work on my website or on Instagram, TheKnifeCenter.com is one of my bigger retailers. And frequently, since they buy in volume, they'll have stuff. Well, frequently it's not on my website because somebody else bought it.
Sure, I hear you. Well, y'all check out theknifeperspective.com. Check out dogwoodcustomknives.com. Follow Dan on Instagram at Dogwood Custom Knives.
Correct.
And what was the last website you just mentioned?
The Knife Center.
The Knife Center. All right. Well, man, again, thanks for coming on. It's been fun. I've had a great time.
Thank you very much. Kind of like leaving your underwear at a girl's house. Not having my cigar. Hopefully that's going to be an excuse for me to come back.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to send you home with one. So.
Oh no, that doesn't give me an excuse to come back and hang out.
Yeah, we'll get together again, no doubt. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with a fresh episode. Y'all have a good one.